this is at the very top of the mountain. This is, I guess... Where's this? This is at the invisible stuff. This is at the invisible stuff. So what we want is... This is at the pedometer. Okay, I think what I'm gonna do... Well, hang on, let me add everyone at here. Howdy, Misa. Howdy. Okay, so what we're gonna do is restart and rush back here and get the pedometer, and then rush to the clock, and then we're gonna do the pedometer, we're gonna do the step challenge and the speed challenge in the same run. I'm pretty sure I can do it. If not, then we will have at least listened to a podcast, which we will also be listening to entertain me. All right. I'm gonna do the pedometer and the clock at in the same run. I think I can do it because yesterday I got a 126 with 10,900 steps, and I looked a little bit at a route, and I think I can do slightly better routing this time, and I won't get all the steps from inside the, castle and everything. But I'm going to be reacting to this, not reacting really, just listening to this Jonathan Blow interview to see what's going on with this game while I do the run, because otherwise I'm going to be bored, because I just did this yesterday, except without getting the clock and the pedometer. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, it's about combining these worlds together, and that'll generate emergent gameplay mechanics.
Maybe turn it down a little
really
bit.
Cool. And maybe there's
Actually, what's the volume like on this?
But we'll just deal with it. The brightness and darkness of the reflection is sort of moving along with the grid of the enemies, right?
Seems good.
Factorial of 5 is whatever.
Maybe seems good. Tell me if I should adjust it.
Factorial, so let's make that.
I'm not gonna be talking much
Getting
though.
the messages from the compiler, that we get that. Here we're passing them to plugins. So that rewrite plugin that we looked at is called from here. So the next games after this
Nate!
are not so fun games.
Nate!
They're not even puzzle
Nate!
Oh, okay. Let me embrace.
different games that are either in some prototype state.
Wait, I want to hear about this.
Or-
Sheesh.
So
Let me. Oh, I guess this is still just the preview part. But let me just switch to headphones so that I can do this without the insane echo. What?
the next games after this are not Sokoban games. They're not even puzzle games.
Not a puzzle game?
There's 3 different games that are either in some prototype state or...
Welcome.
Yeah.
Hello,
Hey.
Jonathan.
Hello again.
Okay, interested to hear about that for
Second
sure.
appearance on this show. First appearance, 3-hour-long interview.
Okay.
Let's see.
We'll see how long this one goes.
You know that Sean Barrett exceeded the record that you set?
Okay.
Deep breath. That's fine.
Jesus, the game is so loud.
Yeah.
I guess I can't change it right now.
You're okay, you're okay, you're okay. You're with Jim?
Or is it
I'm
just
Jim.
one giant-
No,
It's
I'm
one
Jim.
giant
Yeah, no,
thing.
you're Jim. Just relax. Nothing to be
It was
ashamed
like
of.
in the
Everybody.
It was one giant meeting with, I think, one break, because at some point it was me who couldn't follow up what is happening into
Okay.
assembly style tricks of the old days.
Great. Well,
Okay.
that sounds like it was good.
It was a lot of fun. So, can we first start a little bit on the story of development of the Order of the Sinking Star? Meaning,
Sure.
He likes him.
it famously took a decade, or it's taking a decade.
Not quite yet. By the time it comes out, it will have been 10 years, which is absurd, and it was supposed to be a short... So there was a game that I really wanted to do that some people have played, and it's really fun. And I was like, I kind of don't want to go into a big complicated development after The Witness, because The Witness took 6.5 years and was very tiring. And so I was like, we'll just do this short game, and then I'll go back and do this other game that's going to be. And then the short game turned into a giant situation for 10 years.
Seem to have skipped a cutscene.
The long game was the musical game?
No, it is not something that I have spoken about publicly.
Okay.
It's kind of just a secret.
It's
but,
like a super secret. Because we
And
talked
it won't be a long game though. Actually, I did speak about this game tangentially. There was a conference called Practice, a game design conference in 2014, and I talked there about like a game that I would spread out over like 20 years.
That's a really
which seemed like a
inspiring
long
talk that I
time.
enjoyed a lot.
Just in installments, right?
That he's talking
And this
about right
is
now.
that game, and so the plan for it is still to do it in smaller chunks, kind of like if you have a series of fantasy novels that eventually becomes real big, like the Song of Ice and Fire stuff that maybe someday will get finished.
someday.
Yeah, you can build quite a big, sophisticated thing in pieces, right? And so that was the plan for that, and definitely has to be the plan for that now, because I'm never doing a 10-year game again. It's impossible.
Hi everyone. Let me take a break to thank members of the show who made this conversation possible. Members get earlier
Bro.
access to videos, including longer unedited footage from live streams, as well as they're invited to our
Bro is
private
cashing
Discord
in on the
server.
Jonathan
If you
Blow
want to
interview.
support this show, there is no better way than becoming a member on YouTube or Patreon. Thank you so much. But whether the plan was in the beginning to have these now 4 islands like as actual separate games that would be released independently, or was it?
No, it was always to put them together. It's just that, like, when you want
Bro.
to believe things, you'll find reasons to believe them. So it's like, oh, we're basing this on existing material from other designers, right? So those 4 games are they're revised versions of the games, but both graphically, much more sophisticated, and also just design revised. But they're games that existed already, and so I was like, oh, that gives us, maybe that's like 20% of the design work done. And like, no, it's like, it rounds to 0, the amount that, because we built so much game on the back end of that, and revised those and expanded them and all that, that part didn't help. And then in the meantime, this is a game that's fundamentally about a combinatoric explosion, which programmers know generates very big numbers very fast. And like, for some reason, when I was thinking about the game, I just didn't take it that seriously. I was like, yeah, it's about combining these worlds together, and that'll generate emergent gameplay mechanics, and that'll be really cool. And like, yeah, maybe there's a little bit of like a scaling issue, but we'll just deal with it. We just won't let it get that big, right? But then I
no.
just let it get that big. So, yeah, it's a problem. Like, it's maybe not a problem. We'll see if it's a problem. Like, so the question sort of is, do people play it, right? I mean, maybe that doesn't even matter. I mean, I saw some clip. Well, let's not go too far off topic, but there's more reasons to do things than just like, does it find a big audience, right? Do you find personal satisfaction from it? Did it allow you to grow in
Bro is already
skill,
coping
in your refinement of your
with the
personal
lost $20 million.
world? And all those things are true, and so this was mostly probably worth doing.
I kind of thought that was going to be fine. I guess.
But you would also like a lot of people to play if you put 10 years into something. Yeah. You want people to just, even so, for financial reasons, you want to keep doing what you're doing, but also just like, the reason you put so much effort into something like this is because you see what's interesting and beautiful about it, and you just want to, like, you want other people to be able to see that. And so, yes, and that's also kind of how it became a big, long project, is just, you see what you've got at any moment in time, and like, here's what we would like to do to make it better, and like, okay, we could do this good thing and make it really good. We could do this thing and make it like not that good, but it takes less time. And a lot of the time, people choose the less time, and maybe I should choose the less time option more often, but I didn't really. But what that does, though, is it puts you in the realm. So the reason people make those decisions is to defray some cost, right? Like maybe it's directly the cost of paying people to work on the game. Maybe it's just the cost of like how much time in my life am I spending working on something. But so if you're willing to pay that cost, you can end up in territory where other people just didn't get to. And then you automatically have something that's different from what everybody else has. But because you're paying the cost, it is a little bit painful to get there, right? And so
Can you turn
how
the
it
interview up a little bit?
Did
Yeah.
We can't really
it
hear
always
it.
had
Yeah, I
the
can.
same
Your voice is a lot
In
louder.
just a second.
team
Okay.
working on it? And
After
the
this
same
cutscene?
It has
number of
varied.
Or during this
programmers and,
cutscene?
like, artists, like how did it fluctuate?
it has varied. What I will say is because I thought it was a shorter game,
Hey,
shorter development
Is
wise,
this anybody's?
then we sort of
Yeah.
kept a full, well, not even just, so
Iris?
Witness development was pretty long. After that was finished, sometimes it's just natural for people to move on.
Sorry, I was gonna check the. I was gonna catch up on the chat during this screen when I got to this screen, but I figured the volume was already okay. Playing on keyboard, don't care. Don't care about playing on keyboard. Yeah, whatever like actual physiological thing is beneath autism, it just, some people are able to manage it, right? And get to a point where, like, they diagnose autism based on how much it negatively affects your life. So if you just like get good, okay, yeah. Let me add another qualifier. If you have mild enough autism that it is possible to do what I'm about to say, and then you get good at dealing with it and you know, mitigating the negative consequences of that and coping, then you don't have autism now. But like there's still the same thing beneath it. That's a little bit, maybe not quite as, maybe that's not directly related to what you're saying, but that's a thing about autism. Okay. Turning it up a tiny bit.
Other projects, right? So one guy from our art team, Luis Antonio, went off to do his own game called 12 Minutes, which, you know, was released and was a successful game. And so, you know,
Successful in
there's
what
some-
way?
there's some
Everyone
idea
hates that game.
control. But like because I thought, oh, we're trying to do this game in 2 or 3 years, I hired up to like fill that out and like keep a full size team for that time. Which I don't exactly remember how many people it was. So the Witness, we had 8 full-time people toward the end, and then a lot of contractors helping out temporarily. These days, the company is like 10 people full-time, and then again, quite a few contractors. And so
Where am I going?
it has grown, like, let's say, slowly over the past 10 years. But if I were to do it over, I probably would have let the company be as small as it was and just like built out the game myself and the programming language and all this stuff to the greatest extent possible. Like I hired some people to help with that. Eventually we found people who were good, but I don't know, sometimes things just don't work out the way that you wish they did and all that stuff. So
Not familiar with this route.
yeah, but it's a very different. So when I started The Witness, it was like I had done Braid as a solo programmer with a little bit. Actually, Sean Barrett helped on Braid a little bit. I don't know if you talked about that.
No, he didn't mention.
Yeah, toward the very end, I was like really burned out because 3.5 years seemed like a really long project, and I was like, we're shipping on Xbox Live in like.
You wanna
2
go this way?
months. I wish there were some better visual effects. Hey Sean, do you want to come do some shader effects? So he did some of the graphical stuff.
Not really sure.
In the game, and that was really helpful. But yeah, so okay, I forget why I brought that up, but because it was basically me with some people who helped out on the side.
I have no idea where I am.
Right? And then, so when I went to do The Witness, it was a process of slowly building up the team over time. But the good thing about that is it's cheap in the beginning because the team is not big. But then after The Witness finished, it was like more expensive in the beginning, right? And it's maybe not as useful to have a big team in the beginning because, you know, having more people helps if you know that you want to execute on a certain idea, right? And it's like, okay, we need this person to do this and this person to do that and all that. But if you're doing something original and you don't exactly know what it is yet, you know, which is a problem you don't have. For example, if you're making a sequel to a thing that already exists or whatever, then you know what it is, and you don't have as much of a period in the beginning of being unsure, right? But for a game like this, where like there's so many things about the game that only got figured out after years of thinking about them, right? Because the depth of things to figure out was like really, really deep in terms of the number of dependencies. Yeah, it just, I think people are less efficient because it's like, well, the art team is hanging around and they're sort of doing art for the game, but they also kind of don't totally know what the game, like, are we going to have an overworld? What's it going to be like? Like, how big are the levels going to be? Like, what technical features are we going to have for making the levels look good? We don't know exactly. We're sort of making some, and that just, it just means that you can't like deploy people in an efficient manner.
How am I getting lost so much?
Nowadays, now that the game is getting close to done, one of the problems we have is like, oh, there's all these levels because the game's really big. So we have 5 environment artists right now, just like doing art for the levels. But that is a relatively efficient process now because we know what the game looks like. We figured out all the technical implementation. We figured out the visual style choices that you need to make levels look good, which usually is a several phase thing. You know, so for example, in The Witness, we spent this time and we're like, how do buildings look and how do walls look and how does the ground look and all this. And then we eventually got the technical features in, we experimented with them, we figured out the style, and then we started doing trees. We thought we had it all done and we started doing trees and grass, and we're like, those same techniques for solid surfaces just doesn't make sense on trees and grass. So like, what do we do? And then that was a second phase of experimentation, figuring that out. And that's true really for any game that's visually original.
What am I doing?
People have gone through that kind of process.
First of all, is there an official abbreviation of the order of the sinking star? Because it's
I think it's
Oops.
OSS, like open source software.
No.
Right?
really.
I don't know. We'll
Because
see.
on
Maybe
X.
you let people on forums and stuff come up with whatever they want. I don't.
So-
I don't know. The abbreviation was not at the top of my mind when I came up with the name.
Can we still call it Sokoban, or is it now like out of fashion? We should probably use the
Well,
name.
so here's the thing. So, Sokoban is not a very searchable word, first of all, because there's a long history of games called Sokoban, including the original one. So for people who don't know, Sokoban is actually a genre of game, right? And it has come to mean you push objects around or something to solve puzzles, but like there's objects in like a grid-like space and walls, whatever. That's a Sokoban game. But of course, modern Sokoban games are more sophisticated than that. But it all goes back to a game from Japan in the 1980s. It was a home computer game. And Sokoban is a Japanese word that means warehouse keeper. And so this was the warehouse keeper game where you've got to put the crates in the warehouse. And like for a 1980s home computer game, it was really good, like really compelling. At least for the first 10 levels. Like once you get past level 10, it like does some really unfair stuff. Like there's walls that look like walls, but actually they're not walls, and you can walk through them, and the puzzle looks unsolvable, but it's really solvable. Like stuff that you would consider cheap now, right? But in the 80s, honestly, video games weren't that good. So that was great for back then. And, you know, it spread. So I remember playing Sokoban games when I was in college, just like on a little Unix workstation. Like you would be running, you know, Apollo Domain OS Unix, which was like, Apollo was a workstation company that was competing with like Sun and Silicon Graphics and all these people, and DEC. And then everybody had, in the late 80s, had to have a Unix operating system because that became the thing, but they all made them themselves. And so Apollo was a company, they had their own operating system underneath called Domain OS, and they wrote like Unix as a Unix emulator on top of Domain OS, so it was kind of slow and unstable. But that was the first operating system that I used at college, and there was like a Sokoban game that you could download that was open source. It was like someone had re-implemented in C this home computer game that was probably in BASIC or whatever, right, from the 80s. So that's where it all comes from. What I would say is that the original Sokoban game, you would consider it kind of grindy now, where it's just, hey, I'm in a new level, and I have to think really hard about some invisible maze of dependencies about how I would move all the things. There is a little bit of like tactile, like I could push stuff around, and that feels good, and I can experiment, but there's not that much experimentation because it's not that hard to like get yourself into a situation that.
It's still really quiet compared to my voice in the game. Okay, I'll turn it up a little bit more. The G's that are traumatized but still mask. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really. I mean, I definitely have something. I definitely have something right, undiagnosed, but some ain't right. But it's never really caused major issues for me, and I tried to get diagnosed with autism at one point, and she was like, you're kind of like on the fence, but you know, like you could probably go somewhere else and get diagnosed if you wanted to, but you know, I'm gonna say no because it doesn't really seem to affect you. But I think if I had gone like a couple of years after that, when I was like really in a bad place in life, it probably would have been an easy yes. So it's just kind of stupid. You know, it's just, you know, it's not like it's just a syndrome, right? Or it's just like it's not it's not really, I guess it's useful to the extent that it like helps you understand yourself or something, but even then it might be more bad than good if it like, you know, makes you feel trapped in some kind of identity that you could otherwise get out of and, you know, develop skills that help you no longer identify in those ways that might be largely negative. Hopefully what I'm saying makes some amount of sense. Yo, Elo. Wait, free entry for what? Oh, free entry to national parks. Damn. Well, I'm trash at programming. I guess I'm okay at programming. I just have no interest in it. Heck, I'm feeling kind of autistic now too. Has Below talked about Steven Sausage Roll before? He's a big Steven Sausage Roll fan. He has called it the greatest puzzle game ever made. Yeah, Misa definitely does not know about those benefits. Was that a Korean doctor, though? To get leverage at work? I don't understand workplace dynamics, clearly. Okay.
You know, unrecoverable. You know? Like I push something down this hallway and I can't ever get it out now or something.
Do I still have
And
the thing?
so, and in fact, that's the challenge of the game, is to avoid those unrecoverable situations. These days, you wouldn't consider that fun. So how do you make a Sokoban game and have it be fun? The answer is, well, that's
You will see.
part of your job as a game designer, and I think every designer has a different view on that. For me, I'm using it as like a template to look at the way that game mechanics work and the way that rules in games can combine to create complex situations, and the way that that could be enjoyable. And that's something we did somewhat in The Witness, which I guess we haven't said this on this podcast. That was the previous game. It came out in 2016, which was quite a long time. I guess you can infer that from what we've been saying, but that was quite a long time ago. But there were some parts of that design that were really interesting and new to me, which was the way in that game that we focused on like rules and how rules interact, right? And so in this game, I thought I would just take that and like pump it up to a new level of complexity and depth. And that's part of why it took 10 years. Yeah.
Did it, over this 10-year period, have like different versions? Like you said that like trees didn't add up in The Witness, so you
Yeah.
you needed to adapt like the artistic direction. Like, did it also like change design-wise or like artistic fashion?
In every category it changed. So visual art evolved. I mean, the final art style that we're using in our best levels only got finalized like a year ago, which is very short on the time frame of the. I mean, we built up to that. We had a lot of things that we figured out, but the final game has a lot of like atmospheric, like fog and depthy clouds and stuff, and we had earlier versions of that, but just the technical implementation of them that we had for whatever reason didn't lend itself to to being used in really good looking levels, and so we actually have in shaders you have a general class of effects called atmospherics, which are generally like you'll have some vector through the space that you're rendering and you're stepping along it to like sample points in that space and decide if there's some wispy cloud, like how dense is it at this point, and then you'll add up, right? And those are expensive because it's not like you're just putting a color at that pixel, you're doing a whole lot of computation for that one pixel, right?
Wait, is this
And then
optimal?
those tend to use data structures that come from other, so like if I'm sampling the density of this thing, I have to have some density function. If it's a closed form function, like you just made something up, then artists don't necessarily have control over that, and it can't react to anything, right? It can't respond to gameplay events or anything like that.
Oh no.
So you tend to discretize that function and just store it in memory. So you might have some array, some 3D array where there's maybe 1 byte per little cube of space of like what is the value of this function at this position, right? And then of course, if you want that to cover a lot of space, or then if you don't have very steep changes in the function, you won't see quantization artifacts, right? Because you're interpolating over. Although, due to this phenomenon called Mach banding, you do see quantization artifacts a lot earlier than you would think. But there's ways around that. But that also, like a 3D array takes a lot of memory, you can imagine, and so there's kind of a limit to how high can you crank up the base resolution of the thing. It's not just the amount of memory, but as you start using more memory for these data structures, as you sample around them, they're not in cache as much, right? So you do a lot more cache misses on the GPU, because they're just not available.
If you
right?
sample randomly.
Well, so I mean, this is something that I haven't looked at in detail for this one effect, so that's a little bit, but so generally we're rendering at 1 pixel, and so if you're going to cast there's things you can do about all this that I'm going to say. I'm just going to say the super naive version. You can do pre-processes where you batch things together and compute things and store them and come back to them later or whatever, right? But if you're just going to like walk a long array through space and sample this grid, that's a lot like if you know the old line drawing algorithms like Bresenham line drawings and stuff, where you would draw a line by you have the endpoints. It's like a classic thing that you learn in computer graphics class because it has to be like perfect, or Bresenham's algorithm is perfect in the sense that it's not subject to any kind of mathematical error or anything, and you do it within limited integer word size computation, and you do it by saying like, okay, we round our vertices to a certain amount of subpixel in the beginning, and then That's a slope, right? Like, you know, the slope of a line, as you learn in like school, is like the y divided by the x, right? But so how do you walk along that precisely with limited precision numbers? And it's like, well, you quantize and then you represent them as a fraction, but you never actually do the divide. So if you have a fraction on one side of the equation and a fraction on the other side of an equation, you can multiply by the denominators, and then you don't have fractions anymore. You just have really bigger coefficients. And as long as you have enough word size to do that, you can do the same comparisons that you would have divided, but you don't divide. This is like a very, you can look it up. Everybody can look it up. It's one of the classics of computer graphics. But so you can do something like that when you're traveling through a 3D grid as well, straightforwardly. But then you're just visiting, like if you shoot a line through a grid, there's no cache coherent representation that's going to keep all of that in cache, unless there's some really solid prediction machinery in the hardware about where you're going to read next, right? Which I don't know what's in GPUs these days. Maybe there's something like that. But you know, it's not. So you could imagine the opposite, which is like I have a very small texture that completely fits in cache and nobody cares, right? Like, because it's so fast. And so just these problems that you have when things get big, right? Now, actually, okay, all that said, GPUs do have a little bit of behavior with respect to cache than CPUs do. It's actually not as bad in some cases because shaders do a ton of math and they can be very deeply pipelined, right? Like this is the whole thing about shaders is they're tremendously more parallel than a computation your CPU would tend to do. And the programming style is a little bit different. So like you basically almost never do a dynamic branch inside a shader, by which I mean, okay, so if you write CPU code, there's you could think of two kinds of branches, right? You could think of one that you always do because it's based on either a compile time variable or it's just a go-to, right? And CPUs are not really confused by that because you know, they're scheduling instructions in advance of when you run those instructions, and they can see the branch, they can see that it's definitely going to happen, and so there's no, it doesn't have to speculatively waste resources about what if we go the other way in the branch, right? We just always...
I was not able to follow the technical stuff because I was busy gaming, and I don't think I care that much about it anyway, so it's fine. Hopefully someone else enjoyed that. Yo, Tassel. What is this interview? It's about the game and stuff. The game development.
No, we go there, right? So now
You hating?
branch prediction,
You're
right,
covered in
CPUs
spiders.
is about, okay, what
Wake
if that's
up,
a dynamic
wake up.
branch on some variable that's like defined
I'm just
inside the
joking, I'm
function
just
as a
joking,
return
you're just
value of
taking too
something
long
else.
to
We
wake
can't
up.
really know what the value is. We could maybe predict whether the branch will be taken or not based on the past history of the branch, right? So CPUs have that in them, but you know, it's more expensive to do a dynamic branch than a static branch for this reason, right? Both because the branch predictor has to kick in and decide which way it thinks you're going to go, and it could be wrong, and all these things, right? Okay, so on a shader, there's sort of three classes of branch, right? One of them is the fully static branch that's like a go-to or whatever. One of them is a branch on what we call a uniform, where a uniform is a variable that does get configured at runtime, so it's not like in the executable, but it basically doesn't change for a long time. Technically, it doesn't change during this entire render call or whatever, so it's effectively constant for the lifetime of like while these shaders are going to do their thing, and so that's also pretty cheap because you can make predictions based on that and whatever. Fully dynamic branch is then
Think I'm going the right
also
way?
less necessary because a lot of the time you can do what you wanted to do with a uniform, but it's also just a lot more expensive. And so you stay away from that in shader programming, and so the algorithms tend to be a little bit different. You tend to
I have
a
no
lot
idea
more
where I
things
am.
That work
Wait, is this
with
the lake right here?
Dynamic branches. Oh, by the way, let
Oh.
me just notate all of this by saying I don't even write shaders almost ever. So everything that I'm saying here is my high-level understanding based on like, trying to think intelligently about the decisions that we're making and planning the game and all that. Like I don't actually do this. I program all the time, but I mostly write CPU code, and it's often either on the compiler or just the gameplay system of this game, because it's really complicated, and also because that's the best way to design a game, is instead of, like, a lot of designers have a problem where it's very slow and frustrating to design because they have to communicate all the ideas to a programmer, and that communication is imperfect, and it takes a lot of time to have these communication cycles. So if you're a designer who can program, that's way better, because you can just type in the ideas and that iteration is a lot faster. So so if I say anything that's slightly off or whatever, it's because I don't actually write shaders.
What's the
I
lore
think
behind
this is
that
just, like,
telescope I
ton
just
of
passed?
comments.
neighboring understanding.
Ton of comments like afterwards, like peeking all of the details, like that actually not work, like actually, like this has happened last time. I think it's gonna happen this time as well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
This was all the tangent from the question, like how the game changed over time, and this was the visual
Oh,
art
yeah, that
changing
question.
and the fog and density and like all of that.
So technical features like that, we had earlier versions of them, but then they became a lot more, even better or worse is a relative judgment, but they became a lot more suited to the game we wanted to make as we figured out the game. And once they became more usable, we were able to make more beautiful levels with them, which helped the style solidify, right? There were a lot of, so how do we start, right? We tend to have high-level directives in the beginning. So for example, it's a puzzle game where things occupy grid squares, and one of the things that frustrates me about other games is when they'll like add art, but the art makes it hard to read the level and understand where the walls are, where you could walk, what are the important interactive objects in the scene. So whatever the art style is in detail, we want it to meet all these constraints, right? There's a lot of ways you could satisfy those constraints.
My
And
step count.
So part of the process is, like, we kind of know generally what direction we're going, but we're also exploring at the same time. So one example about that also we figured out in the last year is, like, with water. That was a whole thing in this game. We did the water so many times, just trying to figure out how to make it look good and also be controllable by artists, and also just be readable and nice and all this. And so we eventually did, like, our 5th or 6th water implementation is like this Fourier transform algorithm where you do these manipulations in frequency space, and then you do the Fourier transform to generate the actual waves. It's a relatively new thing. I was skeptical at first, just because, like, I think that kind of frequency space algorithm is very good for analysis, but for synthesis, I've always been like, it's just hard to get good looking things that way. But for this, it was great. And then on top of that, we layered some stuff, and so we wanted, so that gave us nice waves, but then we wanted the grid squares to be very readable, and so that was a whole, like, do we use noise functions and we mask them? Okay, that's a little computery feeling. There's not enough artist control, and so what we have now, we have like a flipbook animation, which is like 64, 128 frames, something like that, where we play little foam motion, and then that can be selectively masked with like something like the artist can paint like which parts of the water should have gridding and which shouldn't, which helps it look beautiful, but also because if you just have like a hard grid everywhere, that just right? But you want the gridding, especially, so there's some levels where I need to know, is this 7 squares between this shore and this shore? I need to be able to count, right? And so we provide that ability. Oh, but the thing that pushes it over the top a little bit is, we also have that affect the height of the perceptual height of the waves in terms of how the lighting is calculated, right? We do like normal mapping that is also tied to that grid and that paint. So like, it's not just like foam on the surface, but like the waves will crest around the grid lines and stuff and affect the lighting and all that. And we can do more of that effect or less of that effect on particular levels, depending on just how we want that level to feel. And once we did that, it was like, all right, the water's
How
really
did
good.
tooling?
Pretty sure this doesn't count as steps.
That's part of what we were doing for 10 years, right?
I don't know who that
I mean,
is.
I can screen share some. I did that on another. Do we want to do that kind of thing, or
If you want to do it, sure. I would love to see it.
okay?
Can do a bit of a screen sharing session.
Oh, you know what? Okay, give me.
I
a
do need to
minute.
read
Here's
East
the
of
thing.
Eden.
We have various builds.
But if you want, you can also send me like.
I think technical stuff is on topic for this interview.
Overlay them.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a build with debug shaders, and because we use LLVM for optimized builds, it takes like 90 seconds. But we could run that. I mean, it might be just a fun interactive thing to do.
I thought it's gonna be lambda complex with 300,000 lines of code compiled in 2 seconds.
Well, it does. So debug builds are in 2 seconds. The thing is, because we have limited resources right now in terms of programming power, we do not have our own optimizer on the back. It's something I've wanted to start because it's not that hard to do. Like the thing about optimizing code is it's really hard if you're trying to meet like a state-of-the-art performance number.
Oh no,
Because you've got to
too
implement
shallow.
tons and tons of optimizations, and they're all pretty fragile, and it's easy to make bugs and all this stuff. And nobody wants flaky compiler bugs when they try to optimize their code. That's terrible, right? So it's a big job in aggregate, but doing some of the job is not that hard, right? But we don't do any of the job right now. And so when we want to do an optimized build, we use LLVM. And so LLVM is just really cumbersome and slow. It didn't used to take this long to optimize programs. Now it does. It's actually easier to optimize programs than it used to be in terms of how much work you do. Because, for example, like CPUs used to not do out of order, execution or anything, and so instruction scheduling was very important in older compilers because your program could run faster if the instructions were set up in a certain way, right? And then nowadays, or I guess it's strictly what I said was not quite correct, but depending on how out of order you go, and how many.
It looks like it's going to get a little less technical.
And
Well,
whether your
kinda goes
chip is,
back and
like,
forth.
encoding stuff in the future or not, right? All these things matter. Well, like compilers used to do instruction scheduling. That used to be a thing that you would learn in compiler class. Nobody cares about instruction scheduling now. It's just not a job that the compiler has to do. So that kind of
3,000?
makes it easier. You deleted an entire sub-discipline of compilers, but for some reason, just like all software, they just get slower and slower over. Although actually, to give LLVM some credit, it was depressing because we integrate LLVM in the compiler. We would update it every few versions, and it got slower and slower like every time for what to us was equivalent functionality. The last couple builds have been on par or faster slightly. So they've decided this is a problem. They've turned the train around at least a little bit. Let us give them credit for that. It's still horrendous amounts of code. Like, we have in a little side source tree for our external dependencies, we have like LLVM of the version we're using checked in, and like it's 99% of the source tree of our compiler, right? It's like incredible. So there's all that, but yeah.
I wanted to. I reached out to Chris Latner to do like
Okay.
Jonathan and Chris Latner chat all together.
I don't know if we think about things similarly enough for that to be
Well,
good.
we
but-
would then like realize or like it's not like it wouldn't be a debate. It would be like a discussion.
yeah.
And I think it would be nice. But maybe 2026 is the year. when it's
Yeah,
gonna
maybe.
happen.
I mean, so the thing is, yeah, so right now, because the game is the priority, I'm not doing super heavyweight conceptual stuff on the compiler right now. It's mostly fixing bugs or things that, like, there are design decisions we made a while back that's like, yeah, this should work a certain way, and when I get a little bit of spare time, I do those. But like then once the game comes out, we'll be back in like a heavier hitting mode in terms of language features, and that's when we might do that optimizer and stuff. And some other, we have some ideas about parallel programming that we want to do and stuff. I could show some of the tooling in the game if
Let's
you
do it.
want.
Let's do it.
All right, I'm going to do a screen share. So this is a very simple level where we just do a lot of background art. A lot of other levels are more, you know, a little geometrically more complicated, but a simple level like this is a good start. So like this is the editor. I just press F11 to drop into the editor. This is like a palette level, which is just like gameplay objects that we would often grab. So like here's characters and here's some objects that are in the levels and stuff, right? I can hit Control L to load the level. It loads pretty fast. You know, I can zoom around it. I can, you know, I can start grabbing stuff and messing around with it. So if I decide I
No.
want 5 copies of this plant right here, I can do that. I hit Control F11 and it runs that in the game, right?
Nice.
So it's a very fast iteration cycle. Now, when we design levels, it doesn't look like this, right? So when we design levels, it looks like, actually, let me, it looks like this. So, and you know, here, this is just like, I'm setting up a level where it's supposed to be interesting for this guy to push these little crystals around. There's some walls, there's some floors. You know, it's of course very easy to move these around. It's not as visually focused, but like, if I want to create some more complex collision architecture, right, I can just do that. And so there's a difference between how things, you know, I have arbitrary undo, redo, and all that. There's an entity system. It is not an entity component system.
Entity
for all
component
you people out
ECS
there.
mentioned. Let's go.
Yeah. There's an entity system that's a descendant of, like, I do a similar
What's up with the
version of
ASMR
entity system
voice?
every game, but a little bit better every time. And so you can select, like, this is a class guy, or whatever you want to call that, entity type guy. We've got an ID. We can explain what the IDs are. This is actually an interesting question, is how do you do a game with millions of files where everybody, or with millions of, or how do I say, how do you do a game with like this level of scene complexity that we just saw? You know, this level of scene complexity across 1,000 levels in a big overworld, and not have like source control conflicts all the time and people locking files and stuff. That's like a whole thing. Fortunately, that we figured out very early in development. Anyway, so the levels start looking like this. Obviously, this is a pretty simple one. And then the art team gets a hold of them and makes them look more like this. So the collision stuff is still there. It's just like invisible. So if I hit this, you can see like, okay, here's actually the floor. You know, here's this wall. And we made it bigger than it needs to be for gameplay purposes. But sometimes when we mock up levels, we're like, oh, we want this to be a big cliff wall. And so we make the wall. This only really needs to be 1 high probably, but yeah. So that's what the process is like, is to take something that looks like these brown squares and turn it into, you know, this. There's a lot of tools that we have. I showed this on some other surfaces, but so I don't know how well it's going to work here. We'll find out if it doesn't look good here. But one of the core techniques that we use to make things look better is like this vertex paint technique, where we paint different. Basically paint in colors. Like, okay, the history of graphics programming is that graphics hardware was very, yeah, it's like the readmes, right?
You have your 3-hour video on this.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it
programming
used to
and-
be very constrained because the hardware was very simple. And so it was like, well, at first you just pass this RGB with an alpha color, and that gets multiplied by a texture or something. Then we get more and more complexity, but it's still traditional to have this like 4-channel color that you use as a mod, even though it's like not totally necessary anymore. So we
Isn't this where I went before?
let's look at this for a second. And,
Isn't this my normal route? Oh no, does it stop there? No,
I
no.
don't use this
Where'd it go?
interface very much, so I can. Well, actually, let's use these. I've got some key bindings for this. I'm just looking for like the paint channel, if I can find it. It might not be bound to one of the keys. Anyway, so what I'm trying to explain is, oh, here we go. So we paint into these channels in kind of this low-res way, these different colors, and the colors control the mixing of the channels. So the red means one particular material, green, or down here we have a floor material, right? So here, right, it's something with dirt and grass and whatever, and when we paint red, it means one blend. Let me get back to that. When we paint red, it means one blend, and green, it means another blend. And you can see it's actually this kind of artifacted thing sometimes, but it actually kind of comes out okay. So if I'm going to experiment, let's see how this goes. So I'm going to open the little paint panel.
Somewhere around here, right, is the ladder.
I'm going to open the little paint panel, and I don't know. We could just paint. Yeah. So here I'm changing the surface to be very smooth. Right?
Yeah.
Let me turn off the wireframe. I'm changing the surface to be very smooth where I paint it, and that's one way of getting variation, but you know, the different colors probably mean different things based on how the material is like programmed. Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's just smoothness on this one. I don't know. But let me load up. We had a cool example that came up yesterday. So let me go back to that. Let me see, where was it? Yeah, it was these materials down here.
Nate,
So this is a really
bad.
like visually evocative
What's wrong with this picture?
example of what you can just do with this kind of technique.
Not
So,
a little
like,
bit like
if I,
Inspector
if I
Gadget.
select this stuff
no, just because of the lanterns?
and like I paint into the red channel, it like makes it this older distressed wood, right? And if I remove, or maybe I just right click, I right click to remove that. And so this gives you a simple way that's very artist controllable, because you can also, I don't remember the keybinds, but you can like change the size of this little circular paint spray and stuff. But you can have some meshes and textures that of course you want a variety of those to provide visual variety, but then you can have hand painted visual variety in a very controllable way that enables you to be artistic, right? So if I select all of these, I could say, well, you know, a lot of people come step on this thing, so I want the area around it to be more distressed, and then the pathway that people walk, and then I want everything else not to.
Forgot
be.
there wasn't a campfire
So,
there.
Oops, I'm fumbling and fat fingering. So you could clean it up and then be like, well, you know, we want this pathway that, oh, I didn't select those. I only selected here, but like, okay, we want this to be like that, and then
Hey, is this
if I go
you're
back
the
and select
angel?
these, I could like make this path go this way
you
and
talk-
stuff, right? And it's very, you can see it's very quick, and it lets you do stuff that's like very matters a lot in terms of how the level works. And so that's part of what we were doing in all this time, is like building an engine that has these features. There's a lot of more basic features that you would expect, like, you know, I can scale things, and
I have read a lot of other Steinbeck, to be fair. Just not the big one. But I do like Steinbeck a lot. Thanks, Stavros. It's pretty cold here. I noticed that he said 4chan as well. This is a very good game. We're almost done with it, I think. After this run, if I get the step count and the time challenge, I want to do the underwater gym and then maybe the invisible gym. But I'm pretty sure that's it. I'm pretty sure I don't care about walking around and cleaning up the rest of the cans or whatever like few things are left for me to do that I haven't already done in the world, or like actually optimizing the speed run or anything like that. I definitely don't want to like speed run this game seriously, because god, a lot of it is really boring, especially the late game. Did I miss some cool showcase stuff? This section is called what Oots is about. I'm pretty sure he's just been showing graphic stuff, right? And like the level editor. Whatever.
move them around, and I can select a whole group of stuff and move it around and copy paste it, and you know, so all that good stuff. But this is kind of like table stakes, right? And then a lot of what you end up doing is more custom to your game, like once you figure out what the game is.
People in the chat are shocked that this runs better than like Twitch tab in web development world.
I mean, you know, that's the thing is, so people like me and Casey and Sean and other people who have been educated in the game industry, right? We have this picture of how fast computers are and how much they can do. And this is also a thing you can discover from first principles by multiplying together what's the clock rate of your CPU, you know, and etc., right? How many execution units does it have? Maybe how many cores does it have? Like Casey would go down that route, but like I think multi-core programming is kind of hard. So
What?
even just for one core, right?
Oh.
But you come up with very high numbers when you do that, and then you say, how long should it take to, you know, word wrap some text that's going to go into a window or something? And the answer is not very long. And we've just been in this spiral where software just gets slower and slower. And so people who are, you know, I'm obviously quite young. I'm very hip. How do you do, fellow kids? But, you know, people who are obviously younger and have less experience in the history of computers are mostly running software that's very slow, and so they learn how fast computers are experientially by running the very slow software. And so then that sets expectations. It's like, oh, of course a web page like can't scroll smoothly. What are you talking about? There's all this text on there. There's like 40 lines of text on this web page and an image. You can't possibly scroll that smoothly. And those expectations are set because that's what software is like. And then you have generations of engineers, most of whom don't try to exceed those expectations because they don't think they're realistic. And then someone like me or Casey will say, this should go 100 times as fast. And we get yelled at because those engineers know from their life experience that it has to be slow. So yes, but some places in games, we still try to make things kind of smooth, is what I would say about that.
Do you have a good example to showcase the water shader
yeah, let's
and
look
water
for a
tools?
level. These are, okay, so this might be a little bit of a boring level in some ways. I think it's fun because we have stuff in the background that we just sort of put messily up there, but then it reflects in the water and looks cool, right?
Nice.
But so this is an example of the grid water. Sometimes the materials aren't set up in the way that I expect. But so, okay, so because there's a reflection here, let me run this in gameplay mode. Because there's a reflection here, you can notice like there on the north side of the screen, you see the orange exit north of where my player is. If you look east of that, where there's just like a lot of dynamic range, and there's like dark parts of the reflection next to light parts of the reflection. I mean, you know, this up here behind where the cursor is. That's where it's easiest to see what's happening, where you've kind of got these grid lines, and then the brightness and darkness of the reflection is sort of moving along with the grid lines as it animates, right? And that's because, like I said, this is affecting the normal mapping as well as just drawing the lines and stuff. And so just like that vertex paint thing that I showed you can affect like material properties, here we can do the same thing. This is one of many tools, by the way, but it's one of my favorite ones. So you can go over here, you select the water, you could be like, I want it to be, I guess we're painting roughness right now, so I want water to be rough right there. What's green? Green is, I don't know, some other, that seems like some other flavor. Maybe it's two different frequencies. Blue is like something, I don't know. Is alpha grid? Yeah. So with alpha, I'm controlling the strength of the grid. So like I'm right clicking and erasing grid. Like let's say I was making this level and I was like, it's actually for gameplay really important to have grid over here. Let me turn off the, this is like note entities that we put in levels, so I can turn off that text. So if I just, I'm like, look, it's really important to have grid over here, I can just control that, right? And I can paint that out, but it's still this animated effect that, you know, does all these things. And so, well, maybe I want it to be a donut. Maybe I want really strong grid, but then a hole in it, right? And so you can just sort of do that. And then if we go back to this view, these are all the things that I painted, right? And this is the data that gets stored for the level. It's for most meshes these days, I believe it's per vertex data. In the old days, we had 2 modes. We had textures mapped onto the things, and we had vertices. But I think for the most part, it's all vertices now.
Nice.
But like, you know, that's just
And the water
examples of the tools.
on the board in the
Oh my
in the
God,
middle,
that's hilarious.
on the board
Nate,
tiles.
come on in here. You have
are
to see
also the same,
Honey,
the vertex-
I'll be just a minute.
vertex painting.
Dinner's in the
Oh,
oven.
you mean the paint that I was talking about?
Because like the
these guys.
southwest of the board is
Nate, it's your mom.
overflowing,
Can you bring me a pen?
right, with the water. This level of
South-
water.
Oh, that's actually
Sounds
not
like
what
Daddy
this is.
comes.
This is like a
Nate,
different
come on
thing.
in here. Kyle
This
has
is a
something to show
different
you.
material that's more technological and mechanical, but
Daddy, I
it's
cut
not
my
supposed to be water.
finger.
I see how that it could
Can you
look like
give me a
that,
Band-Aid?
but it's actually still supposed to be above the water.
Okay.
Nate, I can't hear
What
you.
this is a
This is spoilers.
kind of energy disruption effect that the way
Dude, is
these
that
tiles
you?
are being created via matter projection is like falling apart. That's why there's like a rainbow effect and stuff. But this level was, you know, in the game you would see that on simpler levels that don't have water, and your brain would parse it. But yeah, on this level I see how it could look like the water just overflowed. But that's not what it is. But yeah, I don't actually know the specifics of all these. Okay, so here I'm painting it, and it's becoming a little bit darker in hue. Let me select all these again. Whoops, I dragged it. Yeah, so you have,
Yeah, I can see the change.
you know, per material you can.
Surely they've already played a lot of those games if they're interested in them. Right? I think Golden Monkey is a type of piss. No, it's a type of tea, I think. Sip time.
Configure the material's responsiveness to these things. So yeah.
Will there be modding tools released with the game?
I mean, initially
Oh, hey,
we're
you're
just
up.
really
Oh,
concerned.
hey,
with
hey, Moose.
getting the game
How's it
done.
going?
Yeah, good
Right.
morning. I'm just a little surprised to see
So,
you out
but
here.
but you never know. If people are
'cause of
enthusiastic
the-
about your
Yeah,
game
but
and want to
which-
play it in
Yeah.
certain ways,
No, I decided
I
I
don't
was
mind
gonna wait.
helping them out a little, right?
People in chat seem to be extremely enthusiastic about this level editor and
Yeah, it's fun. I mean,
possibilities.
it helps tremendously for the quality of a game if it's just easy to make things. And that sounds obvious, right? But then, you know, people kind of underinvest in tools, or, you know, you get an engine like Unity or Unreal where there's actually been a tremendous amount of evolution on the tools, right? However, like that evolution has gone to making general games and not exactly your game. So often you'll have these tools that have a tremendous amount of work put into them, but they still don't do really quite what you wanted. And then if you have a source license for those systems, which most people don't have, but if you did, it would still be hard to go modify those tools because they're so complicated, because they're meeting so many constraints from so many. And so part of the beauty of having your own system is those problems don't arise. Like if we decide that we want to go do something, we can just make it do that, and it's not at all unreasonable.
I don't really know where
I'm wondering, should I pop open some other panels or something just to show some other stuff? So each one of these buttons is like a different thing. We made a little material browser for some reason because like the art team wanted this. I actually don't even remember how you drag around in here, but I can like move around this view somehow. But like you can like browse the material hierarchy and you can see what it looks like mapped onto a sphere and stuff. Is that useful? I don't know, but that's a thing. I think the art team did really want it, so it's a thing that we have.
Is it?
You know, we've got like, it's non-trivial to make all this stuff happen, right? So,
Yes. And this is
this
partly-
UI, somebody's going to ask about the UI. this started as a descendant of the UI system from
I think I went the
which
wrong
Casey
way,
actually
man.
worked on. But then some other programmers changed it, I think, in a way that Casey wouldn't like, and I also didn't like it.
Maybe I can go
then
this way?
I started with the UI that we have here, and I was like, let me make a system for anyone using the programming language. And it would be funny if it's called getRect, as though it were a function call for like getting a rectangle. And so we actually ship this UI
The center of
system
what?
with the compiler now, and so everyone can make cross-platform UI. It's not the most beautiful most of the time, but it actually can be more beautiful than this. Like, we give you the facilities to set all the colors. It's just we don't always do it ourselves, right? But so
Okay,
that's
it's gonna
what
be
all
over
this
here
is.
somewhere.
Obviously, we don't work that hard on the button icons sometimes, right?
And getRect spelled with the C. GetRect.
Yes.
And also the getRect uses an underlying module simp. Obviously,
That is
for
true.
low level,
Well,
for low level
they're
graphics.
actually a little bit orthogonalized. It'll use simp by default, but you can like plug in. So that was one of the questions. Okay, so getting back to programming language stuff, one of the questions that we have is like, what can you do about this kind of dependency hell that everybody gets into, where like, in theory, programming languages give you code that's reusable and redeployable in different contexts and stuff, but in practice, you want to use certain code and it's tied down by like a bunch of other dependencies, right? And then those dependencies are either not things that you want, or they fight with your code, or they make it longer to compile. And so it was an interesting exercise that I think we've gotten a fair way, actually. So this is simp actually right now. But actually this is another, so simp is meant to be a very simple graphics API where like, look, I just want to run a program. I don't want to know about anything
What are you doing?
about graphics APIs. I just want to open a window. I want to draw some rectangles, maybe with some bitmaps. I want to draw some text and all that. It doesn't have like UI widgets or anything because it's supposed to be simple. But by default, because we don't want you to think about the API, it has to use some API to get on the screen. And so because GL is pretty cross-platform, if you import it's a module as contrasted to like a library in C++ or whatever. We use that word because I thought you need to use a different word than libraries, because especially if you work in games, you'll end up linking against libraries that are in C++ that are written by other people, and those are like a fundamentally different thing than this. This doesn't get built into a compiled representation that you link against. This just gets compiled along with your program every time that you compile your game, right? And that gives you a lot more flexibility, actually, and it means you don't run into all these like link time error problems that we all love from C++ and all that. But anyway, so this module parameter says when I import simp, then by default it'll use OpenGL, but I can give you a different API. And right now they're actually hard-coded, but as we've been evolving this idea, we can go to getRect, which you were talking about. And here, this has a similar thing, but this has a thing called the type indicator, which is a compile time class or whatever. We don't really use that word, but it provides a bunch of things so getRect, it's a UI input system. It needs to draw the widgets. It needs to read input, right? It needs to do a bunch of stuff, and every operating system probably has some default way of doing that, but you, as a person with your own user level program, might be opinionated about that, might want something else. And so how does it do this? And so if you provide a type indicator, it'll have all these functions in it, and they're not even callbacks, they're like static functions that get resolved at compile time, I think. We'll double check if that's true. But if you don't, it has a default value of void, and later on we detect void and say we'll put the defaults in. So when you import it, you can just provide all the defaults with this one parameter, so it's like very, very clean. So if it's void, then we say, hey, we're going to use simp to render. We're going to use this window creation module. You sometimes need, like if you're going to render text, the user needs to say render text with this font. But how do you do that if the definition of font could change? In C++, the answer is, well, you included some different header file with font. And there's all sorts of messes that could happen with that, right, that experienced programmers have handled. Here, it's just font is a type. This is a little more, so some of the inspiration we get is from the functional language side of things, in the sense that This is not at all a functional language. It's a systems programming language where you do lots of side effects and you manage your own memory and stuff. However, there's a certain cleanliness to it that's the same kind of cleanliness that you would get historically from some of the functional languages. And so font is just a type, and it could be whatever, but regardless of what type it is, it's the same size as a parameter as you pass it around. There's certain things you don't have to worry about. Okay, so if you don't pass this, which most people probably don't, you get these things. So SIMP has textures and fonts, and so we use those. Otherwise, we get whatever you said. And so we could look at, so what's funny about this, I brain spaced and I was looking for the definition. The definition of this is whatever you provide. We actually we have an interface thing, so we actually could have said interface here, but we don't do that here. So there's actually not type checking on whatever you pass as type indicator. It just has to have these members, and if it doesn't have these members, you'll get a compile time error. In some other, if I remember which modules we use the interface thing for, because this is all ideas that are in development, right? There's an interface version of it where it'll make sure that you have these members of these types or whatever, and you'll get an error when you...
What if he went through his
the
gay
point
slut
being,
phase and was
if
named
you're
Jonathan
from the
Blow?
C++ world, you have this model that like you use code by including the interface for it as text, and that's not how this works at all. This is like it compiles separately, and then you pass it some data in a well-defined way.
Did I do this correctly?
that defines the thing.
Should be fine in any case.
How you configure it, and so it doesn't make your program messier to use modules in the way that it does in C or C++ when you use libraries. That's one of many advantages. But yeah, so to get back to the point, we're trying to provide this flexibility. Like, if I don't want a dependency on SIMP, right? Or if I want to use a different like module or whatever for opening windows or for reading input, the input here I think is tied to one of these other modules. Oh no. Okay, so I lied a little bit. We actually do take this dependency explicitly, but I'm like, we should put this in the type indicator. I just haven't done it yet. But that's the point, is like you can, if you're thinking sophisticatedly about dependencies, so first of all, I think fewer dependencies is better, broadly speaking. But then also, for convenience, you kind of want dependencies because you don't want people to have to be rocket scientists to use your code. Even to begin with, it's a good pattern if like it's easy to use your code in the beginning, I don't have to think about it. And then as I get used to it and how it works, and I develop more of an opinion of how I use it, or I even, like when I start using someone's code, I don't even know if I really want to use this. Maybe it's trash, right? So how much, like, it's kind of pompous to expect somebody to invest a ton of time and energy to even decide if they want to use your code. Because when you're on the other end of that equation, it's like, I need to solve a problem, I have a certain amount of time to do it. There's like 375 potential packages on the internet that claim to do these things. Most of them are bad. Most of them don't really do a tenth of the things. Some of them are good. Do I believe people's opinion? Do I ask ChatGPT which of these are good? Like, I don't know. And then you start trying to figure this out, and then you greatly appreciate it when it's easy to figure out. Like, can I compile this thing easily? Can I run it easily? Can I use it easily and figure out what it does? And so you want to make it very easy to do that, which means the dependencies that you actually have to take, like, look, it's an input widget, it has to read input, it has to draw stuff on the screen. You want to make that as seamless as possible. But I think the problem that languages, like JavaScript fall into or whatever, is that then, they also invented the words dependency injection, I guess. But nevertheless, there's this culture of like, we just take this dependency by default and you can't do anything about it. And so software just grows monotonically, right? All of this also actually goes to really, so these are kind of, what would I say, more, they're less core stuff. Like, you can of course run a command line program that doesn't have a user interface or doesn't do any input output, and it doesn't need to use any of this. But most programs are going to use like in C, it's like libc, right? In fact, you have to use libc if you're on Linux. You have no choice. On Windows, you actually don't even have to use libc, but almost everybody does, because that's how you like print strings and whatever, read files and stuff. So we have equivalents of that. It's more broken up and much more modular. And so this is a module called basic, which is like, import this if you just want to do a program, and it's going to be a little bit thrifty with dependencies, but it's going to import a bunch of stuff like printing and time and like float conversions and array and you know, memory allocation is actually included at a layer below this, but you know, and then you know, you have some configuration you could do about how you want this stuff to behave, but it tries to walk a line between being very convenient for people who don't want to think about dependencies, but also not unduly saddling you with dependencies. But then, so within this, all these dependencies, oh, okay, this is maybe one of the things that use the interface thing. So here, you might turn on memory debugging, which is the stuff that I demoed at LambdaConf, where we have these visual clients and stuff. And so there's a whole set of hooks in here. And so how hard-coded is that into the system, right? If I import basic, and so first of all, I don't have an alloc function at all if I don't import basic. I could choose not to import basic and define my own, and that would be fine too. But if I do, then do I want this memory debugger? Do I want my own? Do I have hooks for that? And the answer is, you know, there's several options. Up here, when I say, do I want the memory debugger? I say I either have a default one. It's not void in this case. It's like this thing. So the reason this is done differently is we have a relatively new language feature, which is most of the code in this module will not compile until you provide these options, because you need to know what. There's the equivalent of if-defs and all these things.
Oh, that was so much better than I expected.
Gets compiled before that and doesn't depend on these, and so. In older versions of
it's
language,
like amazing.
You didn't have a way to define the interface that you would comply to when you pass the parameter, because anything in the module would compile after the parameter was supplied, if that makes any sense, right? So here it's like, this compiles no matter what, and then, so if you're going to supply a memory debugger, it has these functions. And again, these are not even callbacks, because these are constants, so they get resolved at compile time. Which is not really quite a thing that you have in like C unless you do shenanigans. It's not, because the C sharing model is textual, you kind of have to have a lot of textual pollution to do that, and I don't think most systems do it. But it's faster to call a statically determined function than it is to call a callback, broadly speaking. Again, that's a general performance statement that you should evaluate for yourself. So this all works with like statically determined functions and stuff. And so if you don't provide a default interface for the memory debugger, but you say you want one, you get this thing. And these are actually, you know, in the struct, these are just function stubs that are defined. But down here we say if it's the memory debugger interface, then we have some functions that we use, right? Otherwise, we use whatever you passed. So you get a large amount of flexibility in a very clean way. And basically, so to get a little bit more concrete, right? The function alloc, which itself can call a different allocator on the back end depending on how it's called, right? It calls this allocator proc with, so the C, this is a little bit like what happens in C, actually. I mean, I guess this is not part of the interface in C, right? Like the user level interface, but the convention is generally that there's one function that could allocate and free and do a bunch of stuff, and then you just pass it some number of parameters that say what activity you want to do, you know, what's the memory and all that. And so we have that kind of a model, and that makes it a little bit convenient, because then an allocator, instead of being like a whole bunch of function pointers, is just one function pointer, right? And it's just easier to move it around, or just to think about it even. Like, if you want to supply a replacement allocator, you write one function that does these things. And then if, this is like an if-def in C or whatever, but if memory debugger, or it's like an if in C really, but different, then we'll call this, right? And this is a thing that you defined that's, again, a statically determined thing, and then we'll call the check function on that. And so these hooks are in BASIC. If you wanted to hook into memory debugger from your own replacement for BASIC, you could do that. It's created to be very modular and flexible, like way more modular and flexible than C. Like in C, if you don't want the dependencies, which I'm sure some of these people are in the audience, there are people who don't want to use libc because it's big and bloated and ugly and does a lot of bad stuff. So they're like, I want a minimal executable that only does what I want. In C, you kind of only have one direction of that choice. You can burn down the stack that you could possibly use, because once you're not really using libc, that rules out a lot of other software that like wants things to work in a certain. Maybe you could re-implement some things that are compatible for the dependencies you want to use, right? Here, it's not just one linear burn down like that. It's like you have a little more choice about what you want to use and what you don't want to use. Maybe this is too abstract of a discussion, and we should cut it off there. Because if people don't know the language, they don't know what they're looking at. But
I feel like
whatever.
the large part of the audience, at least the live audience, might be in the beta.
That
as
could be
well.
true. We have
But
1,000 people in the beta. It's not.
I think almost
it's not that
2,000
small.
now. If
No,
the
it's
Discord count.
it's getting close to 1,100. Maybe a lot of
Oh.
people are sneaking onto the Discord who shouldn't be there.
Okay.
I don't know, but on the mailing list, there's around 1,100 people.
We can continue the beta discussion then. Jai beta.
Sure.
In
Bro.
terms of, there was initial plan to release Jai alongside the game. It was like, hey, I'm gonna do
Yeah.
a programming language
Yeah.
and sort of a
Bro.
game to showcase the ability and test it.
Yeah.
So what we have now the
hey,
release
Moose.
schedule
hey,
for the
buddy.
game.
Oh,
Yes,
no,
yes.
what happened to
Jai.
you?
Oh, I
Okay,
just
so
got a
I will
little
tell
wet.
you my
Yeah.
general
Didn't
plan as it
think of
exists
taking
in my
the
head,
zip line over there?
which may change. This is not a promise. This is my general plan. So first of all, like the game is how we survive and make a living and all these things. And so the game is the highest priority. So shipping the game comes first. Now, once the game ships, what we want to do, and I don't think this will take very long, but we want to sort of cut down the source code to the game into a thing that we can redistribute as open source that is the engine plus a lot. It'll basically be a game, but just without all the gameplay mechanics and all the levels and stuff. Because you don't want, like, it's gigabytes of level data and all the art and stuff, and you don't want all that, but you want some art just because you want to be able to run it and have a demo level that looks good, and then be able to use that to evolve your own game, right? And so we want to give that out. And the question is, what does that look like? Well, I think we just publish the engine as open source. That requires people to have access to the compiler to use it and to use all this other code that I've been looking through. I think initially we just give out the compiler as a binary still for some period of time, just because that's easier for us, and it's like less drama and weirdness and stuff like that. But eventually that will be open source as well. It's just how that is done. Like, if my concern is what is the quality of the development and evolution of this programming language after it gets open source, then I don't know, some things matter based on how it's done. Am I the benevolent dictator for life of that? I don't think so, because I need to make video games. Like, I need to design games and stuff, and so I need to have time left for that, and it just takes a long time working on the programming language as well. Okay, but so when do we at least do the binary release of the compiler along with the engine source and all this stuff? Not too long after the game comes out, by which I would say some, hopefully small number of months. It's a little bit complicated because there's also other stuff that you do after release of a game. You want to be very responsive to any problems people are having. You want to also start ports to other platforms. So it's not like we'll be doing nothing after the game comes out, but that is a major milestone that we need to pass. Okay, So there are some other dependencies though. So one reason why I haven't just released the language publicly is because we're still changing a lot of really basic features into better versions of themselves. And the problem is once you release something totally publicly, then a lot of people's code breaks when you change stuff, right? And it's very inconvenient for a lot of people. And so we're trying to get to the best version of the language while removing all that pain for people. And not just that it's pain for people, but in reality, what that tends to mean is that you tend not to make these breaking changes anymore, right? And you end up with something that is kind of messy, like C++ that we're trying to get away from. So this allows us to evolve the language while not leaving this heaping bag of mess carried over our shoulder of the old features. And this is a little bit inconvenient for people in the beta. So they will know, like just in the past week or two, we actually turned one of the old the pointer dereference operator that we used to use is now an error.
Bracket. Not the angular brackets.
It was a very ugly operator to begin with, but like I didn't have a better idea at that time. We did it differently later, and that's just deprecated now. And so that would be a lot. This was a really interesting case. So we could go to the modules again, if people can still see the screen share. So we have a bunch of metaprogramming facilities in this language of the kind that I talked about.
I just did that a really hard way for no reason.
So I won't go too deep into it. People can go look at
Am I even going the right way right now? Oh, I'm not.
I basically talk about the way this language views code as data and has a whole system for showing you what the code is like, and in an authoritative way. So if you want to modify your program with another program, you can obviously do that by rewriting the program text. But that's dangerous because your program that's rewriting the program text doesn't have as good of an understanding of that program text as the actual compiler does, and it could interpret things wrong and make mistakes. Like, just imagine you had a string with code in it, right? And it has to understand that that's a string and not code, right? And that sort of problem just balloons in a different way for any particular language. So when we rewrote this operator, we were like, let's use that as a test of this system. And that this test didn't introduce or didn't exist in the Lambda conf timeframe. This was just done a couple weeks ago or whatever. It was like, let's make a plugin that you can invoke. So when you run the compiler, you can add plugins that add functions that run on your entire program as it gets compiled. This is all user level code. You don't have to have source code to the compiler to do this at all. And what this plugin does is, so first of all, it'll only overwrite your source code if you tell it to. So it's got its own command line options. By default, it runs in test mode. And what it does, it reads messages from the message loop of the compiler, which is exposed via a user level metaprogram. When it sees that code has been type checked, and the thing about code that's been type checked is you know the type of everything, and so it's unambiguous now what the meaning of this is. So any of these like syntactic questions like, is this code in a string, don't occur now, because you can just look and say, oh, this is a string. If I care what's in the string, I can look in the string. If I don't care what's in the string, I don't have to, right? And so it looks at this, it says, what are all the sub-expressions? Why am I getting the build options here? Is this? Yeah, I guess I was doing something that we don't need to do. So that'll be in the next beta, is deleting that line. But basically, we get these type check messages, and we look for unary operators, and we say, is it a pointer dereference that's been deprecated because the compiler is setting this flag on this thing? And then we just put it in some data structure. And then when it's time, we look over everything in that data structure, and we rewrite. I'll just flip through it really fast, but we rewrite all the files that used that operator. Okay, so the reason this is interesting is part of the reason this left less than sign is kind of ugly is because it's also, as you know from C, it's like the left shift operator, and that's true in this language too. So you have like left shift if it's used infix, and pointer dereference if it's used prefix. And like, so if you just string replaced it, you would mess up all your bit shifts in your program, and that's not good. So we actually, go and rewrite the source code, keeping all your comments and formatting and all that. But just in the substrings we need to replace, we replace it with this other thing. And depending on, let's see how clear this code is. Depending on the situation, if it's like a very simple case, like it was this with an identifier and there were no parentheses around it, right? So if it's not this, even, then we just do a rewrite. So we would turn
not this one.
If it was like this,
Oh, Jim.
we turn this into
250
x dot star,
stories.
right?
You like these stairs, huh?
If
Well, I don't
it's
just like them, I made them.
a more complex
Oh, proud of your
expression and all that, we actually have a prefix version of dot star, and we just replace it. So we do slightly different things depending on what's the situation. This whole program it's like 300 lines. It's got a lot of comments, as you can see, but it's pretty simple code, and
I would like to
it just
emphasize
rewrites
this
the operator.
because like people might not realize this, that this is like a meta program
Oh.
that runs during the compilation.
We gotta be careful
It
here.
reads your entire program source code, generates the AST, looks for the
No, no, no.
expressions, and replaces them with the new operator from the
What are you
angle bracket,
doing,
angle bracket
man?
to dot star, and writes
Only
to
in the
source
correct
code.
places. Only in the correct places.
Only in the ones that are like genuinely, and you can know this by compile
Yeah.
time, by their location in the
No.
AST. And this is
It's over.
300 lines. Like,
Yeah.
this is crazy to think of in like a C++ large.
Bro.
language.
As far as I know, no other programming
Okay.
language can do this. Right?
Careful
And,
now.
There are a number of languages now that have some sort of compile time execution facility, but for various reasons, that facility is limited in various ways. Some languages are like, oh, it's for security, which doesn't totally make sense. Like, I know why they think that, but that doesn't totally make sense to me. In some languages, it's just more like, well, it's just hard. It's really difficult to ensure certain aspects of language semantics and compilation and whatever if you can just like run anything at any time. But just like when I made this game Braid and I was like, let's just put rewind.
Can you hear
You
me?
can't
Just
even.
figure out
Yes,
not
yeah, I
linear rewind
can.
a priori and just figure out the consequences of
I'll
that
just
and
sit
figure
here, I
out what
won't
the game
bother
design should
you.
be. For this language, it's like, let's just make compile time execution completely unlimited.
Can't
Whatever
even hear
pain
the
that
very
introduces,
interesting
we will figure out
interview.
how to deal with, and there was
I'm
some,
good
for
on
sure.
the interview.
There
Thanks,
still is some
Sylvie.
stuff that needs to get figured out, but at this point, it's like
You're
mostly
thinking of
figured
me.
out. And then let's just see what you can do with that. Like in the
Dude.
beginning, it was just fun. So famously, in the first live stream for this language, well, it'll take a minute to screen share, so let me not. This it's called Invaders, but it's really Galaga program that we ship to people. It's in the examples, so I think it's that. What is it called? Oh, it's in source. So there's a meta program for this too, but it's just this program for like a simple version of Galaga, and it was really fun in 2014 or whenever that video was, a long time ago, to like run this. You would run it from the compiler.
Really?
you would
I
fight
guess that
the
makes
game,
sense.
and it would
Fancy
only
seeing
compile
you
your
here. We're
code
so
and code
close.
enough
I could
to
reach
do
out and
this.
touch you up.
And it was just a really goofy thing to do, but it was making the point that like, look, you can literally run a video game that renders graphics from inside the compiler at user level. Now, that's obviously a powerful mechanism, right? But there's still a fair amount of distance to go from, okay, clearly you can have this kind of power. What is the most useful form of this power that is used in a structured way that doesn't cause your program to fall apart if you use it? So that one back then. So there's this thing that you can do in any program right now. You could say run, print hello, and that'll just happen at compile time, right? You don't need a meta program. You don't need any kind of structure around this. That'll just occur. In fact, I mean, why not get real about it? So let's make a program. Let's go main. Oh, you know what? I would have to run this from Emacs to do the screen share. Let's see if I could figure out MetaXGel, right? So print, this is at runtime, right? We're going to import basic so that we can print stuff. And now at compile time, we're going to run print factorial of
Come on,
5
man.
is whatever.
I hate this part so
And
much.
of course, we don't have factorial, so let's make that.
We're-
meditation.
We're almost there. Pretty sure that dick
This
is
is the
pretty
bad
close to
version
the
of
end.
factorial. This is the computer
Live
science school
coding.
version of factorial.
A live interview with Jonathan Blow.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
coding,
So
coding interview.
yeah. Okay. Wait. Meta X shell. I never do this. Okay. Wait. So, all right. So that compiled.
Racking up a lot of steps
this
here.
is at runtime, but you can see at compile time here before we ran the linker we said factorial of 5 is 120, right? So this is just a very raw, simple example of compile time execution. A lot of languages can do some version of this in some way, right? But then all this stuff that we're talking about, like with the metaprogramming,
I
and
think-
like, you know,
I
the
don't
way
think I need to be
modular
worried about my
workstation
steps, though,
stuff and
honestly.
the
It
way
seems
workspaces
totally
work
fine.
is all trying to answer this question
I think
of
the
like,
the time will actually be kind of closer.
how do you have your program not fall apart and just
Maybe.
be super messy and incomprehensible as you try to do more stuff with compile time execution? Because, I mean, this is fine when this is really small, but let's say this is like 1,000 lines. Like, so for Sokoban, for example, we have a
look what
meta
the cat
program
dragged.
What?
Jim.
that does a bunch
Now
of
I remember
stuff.
us
This
having
is
a
literally it.
conversation about it's not going to be Jim anymore.
It's
Lord.
1,800
Now that I'm
lines.
your lord,
Right, it's got a bunch of global variables.
Oh, good.
It's got a bunch
people
of
who
stuff.
climb these stairs,
Most of these
we call them
things
the Jiminy's crickets.
Oh, yeah.
should not occur
Use your
in
ribbon.
the
Is her
runtime
name
version
Jiminy?
of the program. And in
What?
fact, we're taking
Some
all
of the
these
people who need help
dependencies
crawling around
to
these
like
mountains.
do stuff.
So it's Uru
right?
for now.
If there's
son of a
no
bitch.
differentiation between your compile time program and your runtime program, then your runtime program has all these dependencies, right? And so, just as a way of keeping it clean and like what goes where and all that, we just started to architect how does this work, and that was actually a long process of discovery. So the plugins, which I showed, let me see. I think there's an example plugin that I can run. So if we go back and we do this. Oh wait, I'm trying to alt tab. That's not work. If I go go back to Emacs, can I find my shell? What's the shell buffer called?
Oh, you just missed him.
It's
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
defocusing me from the
now.
window when I
Yeah.
hit Alt. It's so confusing right now. Let's just run another shell. MetaX shell.
Yeah, I'll play
I don't know how to
Oof.
spell it. Oh, it's the same one.
I'll try to play those other
Great.
Steven games I
Okay,
haven't
so,
played yet before that.
I think I can go. Oh God, how do I? Is it Control P? How do I go back in history or whatever? I'll just retype it. And I can go plus.
hate
which
this
says
one
add a
so
plugin.
much.
I think it's called example plugin. If not, we can go look. But yeah, there we go. So this is just a thing that verbosely talks.
I shouldn't
about
try-
the
I shouldn't
essence of
finish this one
running
right
the
now. I should
system,
save it
because
for her.
If you want to write your own plugin, you might
I
look
think.
at this. And so I can run arbitrary code from the command line by adding the plugin here, and like, you know, it's just saying what's coming through the system. And even though it's a small program, there's a lot of stuff getting type checked because we're importing all of BASIC, which is like all the file stuff, all the print stuff, right? You know, even though this looks like a small dependency, like with libc, it's a substantial amount of stuff, right? And so, but that's like pretty cool. that
I
you can do
hate
that,
this
that
so
it works
much.
that way, and that it's that structured, and that it works as well as it does. And so that was actually cool. So to go back to the rewrite thing, it was part of our thesis that, like, let's say we, even after the compiler becomes public and we want to make some semantic changes, like in theory we could make those.
All right, I'm gonna save it for.
You typically could.
I'll save it
because we
for
have this
Ethan.
whole System, and we have this clear understanding of the program at user level and all this stuff. But it was like untested. It was like I was designing for that, but we hadn't tested that. And so this was the first test of that. It is somewhat simple. Rewriting a small amount of operator text with another one is not conceptually that hard. But it was, as far as I can tell, it was perfect. I have not heard any complaint. It worked on our 300,000 lines of code without any problem. And it didn't, you know, it took me like an hour to do this or something.
It's
right?
nice that you have like a 300,000 line project to test your stuff in with the new
Yeah.
changes. It's
Well, and that's part of the point too, is like, so, you know, everyone's like, why are you making a new programming language? There's so many. Who do you think you are? And it's like, the thing is, when I'm working on a game, it's really hard to make games. I cannot overemphasize this. Games are really, they're always bigger than you think. They're always more complicated than you think. They're a tremendous amount of work to do. And it's hard. Like, you go through these crises in the middle of development where you're like, oh my God, did I really sign up for this? And am I ever going to finish it and stuff? And then you go, look, like, maybe I don't like C++. Let me see what people are talking about. And you look at what people are talking about. Their new language has this feature and whatever. And you're like, that feature has nothing to do with the problems that I have. The problems that I have is just that my programs are really complicated and they're hard to understand, and it gets slow. Once it passes a certain threshold of complexity, it just gets slower and slower, right, to make progress. And so I want things that help me with that. You know, people who make languages will be like, well, your problem is that you have global variables, and that's making your program more complicated. And it's like, okay, first of all, yes, beginner programmers can make big messes with global variables. I even made a mess with global variables in Braid. It didn't matter till we did the anniversary edition, but like, you know, it wasn't great. But like, once you're experienced enough, you're just like, yeah, you use variables within the scope in which they're relevant, and then that's fine. It's not a problem. Like, you know, I don't need a whole programming paradigm to solve a problem that does not exist for me, right? And so you see all this rhetoric, and it's like, but I just want to help. I just want help understanding my program, right?
So this ties to my question about order of thinking star.
Yes.
And how the dry meta-programming features helped development.
Oh. I
Well,
want to know about the game, man.
There's a bunch of stuff.
I want to know about design.
And a lot of these are the ways that they help everybody, right? Because we're designing these things. So one of the things that runs at compile time is a thing that checks your code just to look for errors, right? And we modeled this after what are the kinds of errors that I run into. So just to go again, we'll go to modules check. This is a substantial amount of code that looks for things in your program that are sus and will issue warnings. But the whole point of this is you can replace this if you want with something else. You can augment it with other things. Inside the compiler, there's actually almost no warnings, because one of the things I was sick of from C++ land is like, it just generates 1 trillion warnings and you have to ignore a lot of them and whatever, right? And so, so here we'll just say, or sometimes we just hard error. So some of these are simple things that C++ compilers do now but didn't used to do back in the day. So when I started learning C++, even professionally in games, if you made an error in your printf string, you just would have to discover that at runtime, right? And it makes sense that that would be true because the compiler, the language semantics don't know anything about the contents of a string. A string could be anything and whatever, but this was such a widespread problem that C compilers started implementing a way to tag things as printf functions so that they can then do this parsing of because it was such a huge source of bugs. So we have the equivalent of that. In this language, the formatting is a little different. It tends to be simpler, so we don't have as many problems, but we have checks for that. We actually, I don't know. That's actually, I guess, the main thing that this does in the main file. There's some other stuff about like bindings that Raphael did where, you know, if you have like name mangling for a function that's in a lib and you claim, so whenever you're going to bind to external code, you have the claim in your programming language about the function that you're calling. Like, these are what the arguments are, this is what type they are. But that could be wrong. It's just like something that you typed. And the actual implementation is in some binary file that was compiled by somebody else.
I think you go this way.
Against it. And you can link against it and not realize that you're actually passing the wrong arguments and stuff. And so we have checking for that, for example. Let's see. We do a bunch of stuff, so we control what build we're making from here. So this was, again, one of the core ideas about how we could use metaprogramming, not metaprogramming, how we could use compile time execution as a feature, and besides just running some invaders program, is like, well, if I have compile time execution, then I can use my whole language in my language. So like, I don't need to have a make file or any of that stuff. So this is the make file and everything, right? And so what happens is
Could be very bad. Okay.
you know, we look for some arguments about which build.
Oh, I didn't
we
even
want,
drop the pedometer.
right? And these are like callbacks that we go into based on what build we want. And so
take
this is
another
very
route.
easy to edit and configurable, and everybody knows this programming language, right? And it doesn't
worry
have
about your
weird
phone right now.
pitfalls like make will freaking.
I'm assuming you'll tell me if
Yeah.
it's important because it looks like it's all
At
you.
least older
Yeah, we're
versions of it
just
did, and you're
chatting.
like, what? It looks right. I don't understand why it's not parsing, right? So it doesn't have any weird stuff like that. You know, there's no like weird Python that only
It's
some
not me
people on the
sending
team
you
know or
anything, it's
whatever.
just, you know,
And then it's just it can share code with the target program as well, right? So when we go look at one of these, like if I'm going to do a release build, it's just a little whoops. I jumped away from it. It's just a little function that sets some options and the name of the executable and whatever. And we have a bunch of these. Let's look at other stuff that we do. Okay, here's actually a pretty big feature. So
No.
in a language like C++,
Oh, no.
actually they have now sort of added better introspection to C++.
Tree.
I assume it's bad.
Tree.
I don't use new C++ features anymore.
That
but
is
they had
so
something
sad,
else.
man.
But back in the day, there was this very, very limited introspection.
I don't know where the
that you
clock is.
had
I have
called
no
RTTI,
idea.
runtime type information. That was
Okay,
actually
that thing
useless
looks like
for
it's
most
stopped up
purposes. And so, but one of the things, so you saw the interface that we had earlier where I could click on an entity and it's like, it gives me all the fields. Those are the fields, like if I go into the source code, it's in the game subfolder, and I look, we clicked on a guy, right? Those
see
were
the
literally
clock,
these
okay.
fields from the source code. Here they have some annotations about what versions are these valid in, and should we display it in the editor or not? That's what, you know,
Not
that.
at lunchtime.
Um,
Like 2 or
should we
something.
serialize it into files or not, and all this sort of thing. No serialized implicit means don't put it in the interface. And so there's versioning and all this stuff that happens. C++ doesn't help you with that at all, at least it didn't back when I started this language. And so you would end up just, for every type that you declared that you wanted to be able to serialize or have an interface for, you have some other function that registers that type, right, and does stuff, and you could have mismatches between the function, because you're maintaining a separate thing, and all that. So the way all that works in this language, let's look at something else. So something else that seems different, and we'll show how it's related. So we have, you know, I popped up the little console for a little bit and had some commands in there. Where is it? I
feel like
never
this is
know
still
what's in
fine.
the game folder and what's not. It kind of doesn't make sense right now. We need to factor it some more.
Not gonna stop and
so
check
you
the
can
clock,
define
though.
any function and you can tag it with a note like this. You could say this is a command, and it'll just automatically show up in the console. You don't have to like have another function that also registers this thing with the console, and it just helps cut down on the amount of like busy work that you have to do to make these things happen. And so the way these things happen in the meta program is, let's see which of these we see first. It's 1,800 lines, so there's a lot. But okay, so here again, this is the loop that we get, like in
Journey.
you know, the plugins that we were looking at. There's a loop. We get messages. Here we're getting the messages from the compiler. That we get that. Here we're passing them to plugins. So you know, that rewrite plugin that we looked at is called from here, right? We call it. But then we can do whatever else we want with that message. If we're done, we complete. This was just an old like robustness test for the compiler. But then here's our actual function that we call, right? So here, okay, so this is like that register command note that we saw. Here's where that gets handled. We're like, okay, if we see some headers of procedures, functions, whatever you want to call them, look at the notes. If there's a register command note, first make sure that we can parse out, because there's some details that you could tag on the end, and then we put it in commands to register, right? And then we make sure that we're not dead code eliminating that procedure, by the way, because we want the console to be able to use it. This actually might not be Oh, it's because we parse the comments out of the body of the procedure, like Emacs.
What is he even talking about? I
Anyway,
have not been listening for so long.
So, yeah, like if we go back to this for a second, this
Is
actually ends up.
Let me just-
when you say help.
when you say
and
game
the name
dev,
of the
right?
command,
Because like obviously the
it'll
title
do
does
this.
say talks
It'll
game
automatically
dev,
get out of it.
right?
And so that's why.
When you say
we
game
wanna make
dev,
sure
do
that
most
we see
people
the
take
body
that
of
to
the
mean
message.
only programming? Because I
Before-
kind of take it to
so
mean everything.
What we're going to look at next, like,
And there's
actually
been no
generates the
design.
code that hooks those
There has been art,
those
I guess.
functions into the console as commands, and the function is definitely live after you do that because other code is calling that code. But we want to have this string available when we do that, and so if nobody in the program was calling it, we wouldn't, like, the body wouldn't necessarily get compiled. If you're compiling with dead code elimination, which you may not be, I don't know. Okay, so commands to register, right?
Figured that was
Comes
gonna
down
happen.
here, and we sort it just to
Oh, is it gonna stop in a really weird
alphabetically
spot?
just to make
Oh
it nice and
god,
consistent
that
between
is
the
actually
runs. Because this stuff is
horrible.
coming through a message queue asynchronously, so you get these messages in different.
I'm gonna
order
keep going.
sometimes.
I'm gonna keep going.
Because the compiler is doing some stuff in parallel at least.
I feel like being
and then,
sideways helps, but maybe not.
Down here we actually we check if you try to redefine something
That is so
twice.
stupid.
But if you don't, we just do. This is just some regular string formatting where we're calling a function called add command with the name of the command and then some options and stuff. And we actually, these functions. So this one has an argument. We look at the argument list and we do. When you're typing a string, just a command string into a console, you might type numbers, you might type booleans, you might type strings, and they're untyped, right? And so the thing that runs the command also does a simple programming language kind of thing where it parses the integers, it parses the strings and whatever. And so you don't worry about any of that here. I've definitely used command systems before where you did, but let's look for something that takes an int. Yeah, well, advanced level, well, that could be called from outside. Like set window size takes 2 ints, whatever. You can take whatever type you want here. Well, as long as it's one of the primitive types that our metaprogram handles. So we do all that. And then when we generate this, we pass those arguments. Wait, no, okay. So I'm skipping over something. So the binding for this add command has the pointer to the function that you're going to call, but we don't just call
138,
it.
okay, that was
That's what I'm
easy.
saying. Add command
No achievement though.
adds a callback that parses the string and then calls this. Is basically how it goes, so that you get structured data in there.
No achievement yet.
No,
Can I
I
skip
would
this?
have to look at. It was a long time ago that I wrote this.
What
but
is this?
Those implementation details are handled. Is the point? And then, so okay, we talked about entities for a little bit, right?
What the fuck?
Let me. Where is this? Okay, so we have this file called generated entity data, where there's various things you want to know during runtime, like what are all the guys in the level, right? What are all the rocks in the level? Whatever. And so we store entities in this data.
I'm not
structure
messing with
called
that.
Bucket array, which is, a bucket is just some amount of contiguous memory. And so all the guys are
Also
stored
afraid I'm not gonna
contiguously
get my
in an array.
achievements.
All the monsters are stored contiguously in an array. And that means if you want to iterate over things by type, which we do often, that's pretty fast, right? Because they're all that good stuff about things being contiguous in memory. Okay, so, but we don't know what the entity types are. We don't know what the default values are for this. There's all these things that we use to, at runtime to do these operations. And we just say, well, we don't know what those are yet.
Let's go.
And placeholder says this
The
is going to
double.
get generated by the meta program. And this was another thing that we had to figure out because, initially it was just there's this programmer idea that we have when something is powerful. Like, oh, this feature is so powerful, you could do anything with it. You could just add a string to your program that just defines a bunch of stuff. And it's like, yes. But then when there's an error somewhere and I have an undefined variable somewhere in my program, and it was going to be in that generated code, but I don't read that right now. 'cause I
You're
don't
okay,
have
you're
a
okay,
view of all
you're
the
okay.
generated
With
code.
Jim?
It could be
I'm
really hard
Jim.
to debug.
No, I'm Jim.
And
Yeah,
so this
no,
is a
you're Jim.
mechanism
Relax.
to make
You're
it clear.
Jim.
Like, if this never gets generated for some reason or whatever, the compiler will say this function tried to use num entity types, or this data structure tried to use num entity types. There's a placeholder for it here. So it's not just like undeclared variable. It's like, oh, this was supposed to get filled in by compile time execution, but it didn't, right? Okay, so that is going back to the meta program, gets filled out here. So num entity, where? I hope it's not in a different file. Again,
Trying to figure out the donkey step thing.
oh, you know what? I moved it. Okay. It used to be out in that meta program. But again, one of the many issues that we work through is, okay, there's a lot of cleanliness and structure and stuff that you gain by having a
I
separate
don't know.
program like that.
I don't care that
But
much.
Also, it can make things harder to understand, because one of the things that's hard to understand about larger code bases is when things depend on each other, but they're far away from each other in the code, and there's no explicit
Wait up,
thing
Nathan.
There's no explicit note
Jim.
telling you
Yeah,
about
no,
the
I
other thing or
remember
whatever.
from the
It's
cave,
like,
yeah.
I
Yeah,
have to
no,
spend time
I,
learning the system and
feel like we got off.
understanding what are all these invisible constraints. And so, I actually saw this earlier when we flipped past it, but we have this note called run when all typed. And that's just like that thing. This is the same kind of note as we used to register the commands and stuff. But what this says is, this function to generate the entity code, I want it to be near the entity code and near the stuff that gets generated. I don't actually want this to be in a separate meta program, right? But you can't just run it off the rip, because it depends on knowing all the entities and stuff. So we have to wait a while to run this. How do we know when to run it? Well, the meta program knows when to run it. And so this note here, run when all typed, if we go back to the meta program, when we see that, we add this to like hooks to run, and then for all the hooks to run, we actually add a run command back into the target program to run that thing. And so this gives you a way to factor these things back into the program. Like, I could have just said the following, like we said in that simple program where we ran print factorial. I could say run sokoban emit here, but then this is going to run like whenever the compiler sees it. And no, we want to wait for all the entities to get compiled and make sure that we have them all and stuff. And so
That felt really
this
fast.
is just a more sophisticated way to do that. Anyway, this
I
is
guess
what
the
generates
pedometer is
all
just
this
pretty
stuff.
far out
And
of the way.
It used to be in the meta program, but as the part of evolving things and making them more convenient and more usable, we created this facility for factoring things back. But this is only, that's not even a convention of the programming language. It's only a convention of our own meta program. Whether that's something that takes off and other people end up doing, I don't know. But like, so this is creating all these variable declarations that you saw at the top of the file and filling in those placeholders with compile time generated data. And so as a result, you don't have to maintain anything, right? You just go, I can create a new entity and it'll be there. And that's great.
Can we do now a 10-minute break? Because I need to a bit of emergency walk the dog.
Okay, I understand. Okay, people,
Bro.
10-minute
So
break.
10-minute break, and we come
I
back
need to
for
figure out why my desktop is being so weird, but yeah. All right, I will make some more tea. Look at this.
Perfect.
The tea. the
Did he
tea is
did he
down to
forget
the
that he
level.
had a dog when he scheduled this interview?
emergency on both ends.
Yes.
So
Oh.
coming
All right.
back in 10
Is there
minutes.
where? Let me go to the YouTube. Do I want to read YouTube comments during the thing?
Do you want to read YouTube comments ever? My dog had diarrhea, that's what it said.
Capability for commands and
I didn't read the
entities
rest of
now,
it, but it said my dog had
which
diarrhea.
I'm assuming. I was trying to imagine how much
Brother.
code it would actually be to do those in C++ and how messy
Your
would it be
dog
to interface
diarrheaed
with
all over this
CMake and then
stream.
add the new sources that are
Podcast.
generated and stuff like that. And the convenience of using those features are awesome. Enjoy. In the language, sorry. In the
Sure, you can
language.
call it whatever. Some of this was based on some of my experience early on. So at one point, I was an intern at Sun Microsystems when I was in college, when that was a thing, and they had some user interface builder back at that time that was like, everybody loved it because instead of just writing some code to create buttons and whatever, you could like drag the buttons into the right place, and then you hit generate and it would generate some C++ code for that, right? But so once you do that, then and,
Is
you know,
this
that
this
had
path
its own
again?
little textual
Oh, wait, I can just walk
specification
up this
language for its own project file,
thing.
and when you hit generate, it turns that into a thing. But then that led to
I think you
these
can just kind of.
process. Like I forget. I guess there was like this whole IDL thing that
not
was
really.
Spread through all the code. Then it was called interface
Uh-oh.
definition language, right?
Yeah.
And actually, there were multiple
Okay.
versions of this. So I
Let's
think it's
just
kind of
take the normal
Sun
path.
had their own one, and it was a standard step in building programs there. That like there was a step that generated from the IDLE to the C code or C++ code, and then from the C++ code, and it not only made building slower, but there were all sorts of like, oh, I just got this file from source control and the timestamp was kind of wrong because it wrote.
You don't
it
think
wrote the
Woo
IDLE
Cache
file,
is a plucky
like, before the generated file,
young
and
sidekick?
so the IDLE file is actually newer.
Woo Cache
but
doesn't fit
it
the
doesn't
bill?
Realize that, and so it's
How
not
am I
the
over
build,
here?
and now my build mysteriously fails, and it takes me an hour to realize that the file was out of date. So like all that kind of stuff, it's just like I just have all these memories from decades of pain, right? Because when you figure that out, it's so stupid. It's like, oh my god. And so when I design these features, I'm trying to solve these problems that I had, right? In a very reality-based way. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to have all this like generate. So part of the way that programmers nerd out, right, is they envision some really complicated system, and they're just like, oh, it's so beautiful that this program passes this to this program, and that does this thing and passes it to these 3 other places, and then there's 17 microservices that all rotate it, and then blah blah blah. And it's like, no, because that's so many points of failure, right? And so many things like, okay, to program, you at least
Almost
need to
knocked over the
build
Cairn
your
while
program,
sneezing.
convert it into an executable form. So in some way,
That would have been pretty
any
funny.
complication that happens in building is something that literally every programmer has to deal with, but also even like understand. Like you have to spend time understanding all that machinery and how it works. And so you just don't want it to be complicated and full of all these failure cases, right? So like one of the, this is a little bit of a cynical way to say it, right? But like if you're gonna build a like you can't actually program in C quite, or let's say C++, because it's got more of a sometimes people do single file C programs, but like the culture of C++ is you have all these files in all these directories, and then some of the files are only on some operating systems and whatever. And so you can't, like C++ cannot define its own program. You need something like a makefile, or a pre-make file, or a GNU config file, or like whatever. You need multiple programming languages as the cost of entry in order to program C++. If you use the makefile or whatever, CMake, whatever, that doesn't give you any kind of GUI to manipulate your thing. And so now you're going to redundantly have some GUI config file specification that says what's in the program and where, like Visual Studio does that, right? And so it's just kind of, it's way more complicated than it needs to be,
Or you have
right? And
more
so
than one.
we're-
You can have like CMake that generates the Visual Studio project. That was now the definition of how to compile.
Yeah.
Real case scenario.
That's one way it goes, or the other way it goes is you just have a bunch of different ones on different operating systems. So like, oh, we want to compile for iOS, so we have an Xcode project that defines the program, right? And we want to compile on Windows, so we have a Visual Studio project. And we want to compile on Linux, so we have a CMake project, and they're just all completely in parallel, which means they're always out of date, right, when you make changes and whatever, and you have to synchronize all the things. And it's just like, why have we made such a big mess out of the most basic things that everybody has to deal with, no matter what? And so I'm trying to simplify. And now this is one of these mildly controversial things, right? I might tilt my camera a little. It's one of these mildly controversial
Controversial
things
camera tilt.
because the Unix philosophy, let's say, it hasn't actually turned out this way, but the idea is you have all these components and they're really simple and easy to understand, and you just string them together to make programs like from the shell or whatever, right? And that probably kind of worked a little bit in 1970, but I think it's been shown to really not be a good way to make things, in part because now all those components are black boxes where it's a great amount of effort to mess with the source code and somehow manage to compile them and all that, right? It's not like, well, I mean, some of them are themselves shell scripts or whatever, but at some point the leaves that actually do the work are not shell scripts. But people look at that kind of design and say, look, it's so simple because all the components are simple. But well, actually a lot of, like, awk is not very simple, and you're using that all over the place. But also, you're only looking, you're taking this entire system of all this spaghetti and all these things, and you're only looking at the leaves and not even counting the number of leaves and saying they're simple. But like, to understand and deal with the system, you need to understand
Most
all
of the way
spaghetti
there.
that you just skipped
To the
right?
last achievement.
So, you know, and whereas on the other hand, if you do, like, I would characterize this programming language as a little more of a monolithic design, in the sense that it's taking all these responsibilities into the design of the language. It's like, look, you shouldn't have to learn 5 programming languages to compile your program, so we just take care of everything you need to compile your program. That does make it a little bit more complicated than if we didn't do those things. But on the other hand, it's way less complicated than if you're trying to do modern software engineering across all these platforms and all these things. And it can be way more powerful. And so that's the choice that we make. Now that said, you know, the thing that I think of in Unix land when I say that a lot of people are going to think of is the whole systemd thing, which I don't think that was the right. Like, that was a whole, like, let's take
Can I
this
stop right here?
system of init scripts and turn it into a big monolith, and like,
Does not seem
I don't
so.
understand why you
Oh wait,
need
we can go right here.
lines of code to decide what programs to run at startup. Like, that doesn't.
Why is there rock climbing stuff here?
So
Holds.
just,
Rock
I think you
climbing
need
holds.
to delete all of that and start over, please. But for this, like, a programming language is a place that you, as a programmer, you live inside that programming language all day, every day. So like, some things really matter a lot. Like, when things are bad, they're really aggravating, and they're kind of, you put all this effort into this thing that you're trying to make beautiful, like your own program, and like, you're being stopped by like something about the system that you're trying to use, and like, that really sucks. And so I'm just trying to be mindful of all this. So some languages,
I wanna stay
when you
left,
ask
I
them,
think.
why did you design these features in this way and whatever, they'll say, well, a lot of programmers are beginners or aren't that good or whatever, and so this feature is curtailed in this way so that you don't shoot yourself in the foot or whatever. And it's kind of a patronizing way to design. I mean, it is true. So look, you know, even, you don't have to get egotistical about like, oh, this programmer's better than this one or whatever, to just acknowledge that obviously when people are new to programming, they're less good, and then they gain experience and they get more good, right? So there's a curve of how good is anybody at any given time. And yes, especially because programming has been a growing field, there's always been more new people than experienced people. That may be changing soon, because we had this whole, oh my God, AI is going to delete all programming jobs in the next 3 days, right?
Whoa, I haven't seen this. Not gonna mess with
That
it.
is a reality, right? A lot of programmers are inexperienced, but
Or should I?
I think it's a more nuanced way to design, to say, okay, look, we're going to try to have good error messages. We're going to try to have things that help you out when we're going to have good document. Like, why do these same people who say we curtailed all these features so that beginning programmers can have a better time, and then you try to go read about how
This
anything
is-
works so you
this
can
is
learn
so
the
true what
language,
he's
and
saying
it's the
right
worst
now.
documentation you've ever seen, and it takes somebody to like write a third-party book that you have to go buy in the bookstore in order to actually learn the language. Like, it's ridiculous, right? So we actually try to do a better job with that too. Our documentation
Jai is like
incomplete, but what is there
hilariously
is
easy to
meant
learn
bring people
as a
up
complete
from
programming
near
noob.
zero knowledge to being able to use the language, right?
It was very easy for me to learn compared to anything
but also,
else.
like, you can be high dynamic range about this. You can say, look, we're going to talk about a feature now. This feature really isn't for beginners, so if you're a beginner, you could skip this part, come back to it later when you know more about what's going on. You can shoot yourself in the foot with this feature pretty badly. It's
What
for experience.
was that?
Right? Like you wouldn't say, like if people are gonna like build an office building,
He just like
they have
launched himself upwards into
really
the air.
strong tools that most people don't need. They'll have like jackhammers and big like earth digger machines and whatever, and you don't. So first of all, I don't have a giant like earth digger machine in my yard because I don't need one because I'm not in that line of work. So first of all, I don't have any weird complex. I don't act like, oh, I have self-esteem problems because I'm not good enough to use a big earth digger machine, right? That's not how it is. That's not what I do. It's like I might mess around and like dig a little hole somewhere to put a plant in, but that doesn't mean I'm in the same line of work as those guys, right? First of all. Okay, but somehow in programming it becomes a big ego thing, like, oh, this is a tool for experienced programmers. Oh, you're saying I'm stupid, right? Like, no, it's just like, look, different people are doing different things. They require different levels of tooling to do their job, and that's not a surprise anywhere in the physical world. But somehow in programming, people freak out and they're like, you're not designing this for every programmer to use. And it's like, no, we're not actually. But that's, so there is this design process that a lot of languages go through where it's like, it's some subset
Oh, I
of
have to do it
design by
again?
committee where it's like designed by committee for literally everybody. And therefore, everything has to be not really a power tool.
Wake up! Wake up!
And I don't like that. Like, as someone who gets very deep into my own projects, I want
I
to.
think I want to go.
Ways to solve
I'll go this way.
problems.
It's right over here somewhere.
What?
Yeah. So that's the mindset from which these features are designed.
I'm wondering what's gonna then happen. You kind of alluded to this earlier. How is the language you're making gonna look like?
You're subconsciously
after
drawn
the
to it, Misa.
release, you know, if
What does
because
this?
then,
What does this say
you
about
can-
you?
You know the story about like the languages that like, hey, they started out nicely. Even LLVM has the similar story, right? Like, and it was like designed by one person, coherent vision, like pushing this forward. And then like, then the committee happens, and then everybody happens, and then like now we're designing for everybody by committee, and now it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so on one end of the spectrum, let's say you release something and you successfully make it nice, which is hard, so you might not even succeed 100%, but you make it as nice as you can. And then you release it, and then that happens, right? It just gets turned into the same thing you were trying to avoid. At least you had that thing from some moment in time that other programmers saw, and that can propagate forward in time when they make things. Or like, oh, I saw an example of a thing that had certain set of properties and it wasn't
I
incumbent.
think there's another body of water past this.
I would like to do
outhouse
better
one.
than that, but it's hard because
And that's
like
what I'm looking
saying,
for.
I kind of need to choose at some point where my time and energy goes, and I think so. You always have to look. We all have talents in more than one place, right? And so, like, hey, I'm able to program, I'm able to design games. Which of those is a more unique contribution to the world that I have? And I do think that I have a relatively distinct way that I program that is different from a lot of people. But if I look at that versus game design, I'm like, my contribution is more unique in design. Like, I have more of an individual voice there. And so maybe that's where the effort should go. Which doesn't mean I don't program. Right? In fact, when I design by programming, right? But it's like, if I'm going to spend some number of work years, am I going to put it into the compiler or am I going to put it into the next games? I feel like the right answer is a little bit on the compiler, more on the games. Not that I'm a moron, but just more on.
But would you
The
then
games.
solidify sort of the language?
Well, then, so I have this problem to solve, right? Of how do you prevent things from reverting to the mean, right? Like I'm trying to make this thing that's not a mess.
No.
Even so down to simple things. So we've talked about all these features that are different from other languages and stuff. But there's even simpler stuff. So like that basic code that I showed that's the equivalent of libc, it's like much simpler than anyone's libc, right? You can understand the code relatively easily. You can step into it and it makes sense while you're debugging your program and all that, which is not true for any C or C++ that I ever used. And so like even something simple like that, you can just imagine that decaying over time because people want to add this, they want to add that, they want to refactor this a certain way. And like, I don't know, maybe it's not really possible for those things to maintain. I'm not sure. But it's a problem that I want to try to solve to the greatest extent possible. I just don't know. So you could think of a few approaches. One is completely hands off, throw it over the wall onto GitHub and I'm done. And here you go, guys, right? That's not completely, that wouldn't be the complete story no matter what for the following reason, because we're using this language in our future things. And like, so then we kind of have a choice. Are we running an internal build of the compiler that we just evolve separately from the public one? Or are we using the public one, right? Or is there some hybrid thing where we're importing changes from the public one and then are we republishing those eventually? And like, so that's one layer of figure out what that is. And I don't know the answer right now, honestly. Another layer is organizationally. Like, is there a benevolent dictator? If that's me, it's probably not me for a super long time because like I said, I need to do games. And the thing about, so we have a beta program right now, right? It's got a decent number of people in it, but it doesn't have the whole world in it, right? And once you have the whole world in there, you're talking about like running well on like CPUs that you never heard of.
Wish
right?
I could
And
save state up here because I don't really know how this
whatever
works.
you
Maybe I
think
should
of,
watch a
right?
video.
There's use cases that you never heard of, and like that's one of these things that drives this expansion and this like cluttering. But it's also one of the things that makes languages be used in the world, and like it's one of the reasons for things to be open source, right? Is like, oh, this doesn't target my weird CPU that nobody ever heard of, but I can make that happen because I have the source code, right? In theory, that's why things are open source, and in a very small
Let's see.
percentage of cases that still happens, even though it almost never happens statistically. So
Can you guys see this? The Steam guide.
So, I mean, somebody has to deal with all of, like, okay, all these change requests are coming in.
Oh.
Do we?
This started
what do we
inside the
accept?
gym.
What aligns with the direction that we want?
Okay,
this language
reach
to
the
go?
diving board, jump in the
For
water, and
instance,
swim
well,
toward the
that's if
hole
you're
inside the
interested
water
in
before you
with-
surface up. I mean, that doesn't
You know, I
tell
don't
me
want
where
that
that
to
is,
be
but
me,
okay.
honestly, also because I just don't like doing that. I want to work in a clean system that I had control over and where I can do, you know, so these decisions about like how are we going to architect the meta programming and all this stuff, I can make these decisions mostly in the absence of friction, right? We do have a little friction, like I
Oh.
said, from the beta group, but it's not that bad, and everyone in there is. Most
I think
people
we've
in there
arrived.
Are pretty cool. Once in a while, we get someone crazy, but that happens when you have 1,000 people. We've only had to ban like 2 people, I think, so far, out of 1,000. That's not that
Alright,
bad.
let's
for the
pause
model.
this. Got through 2 hours of Jonathan talking about programming. Okay. What's going on here? The greatest, 118.24. Let's run on the treadmill. Okay. So I guess I'm supposed to start this way. Or is this the end? It looks like it just started. Maybe you can go either direction.
Is it over? Is it over?
I'm at the last achievement challenge thing.
I meant, is the interview over?
Oh, no.
No.
No. There's like 30 minutes left or something.
Oh.
Including hopefully something about the game. I mean,
Is this Jesse's gym?
yes, this is Jesse's gym.
So what are you supposed to do here?
A lap around the gym in less than what is it, 1 minute and 18 seconds or something?
Oh. It's like the achievement or a world record?
Achievement.
Oh.
World record, I think, is 30 seconds?
30 seconds, oh well.
I should actually kind of slow down here and get a decent step. None of this is really hard. It's just a good little variety speedrun challenge. Maybe this is kind of hard, actually. Do you have to be kind of quick?
I think that everyone left and everyone who's still here is just asleep from that interview.
Yeah.
No offense. I'm sure.
I mean, I'm not. I'm not offended. I was also not very interested in that stuff.
Yeah.
Can you not just like do this? Oh, can you? Okay, interesting. Damn, 30 seconds seems crazy for this.
Yeah, I'll have to watch that later. That seems crazy. I'll have to see what kind of crazy tricks.
I mean,
they
even
do.
just this, I can't even do it in 30 seconds.
That was good. Oh.
Okay, that was 2:30. 2:30. Good time to go to the dentist, am I right, guys? All right. Why would I not just take time? I feel like it would be nice to go straight onto that. Slide down on the left and then go straight onto that. It's tricky.
Nice.
This was definitely a lot faster up to this point. No. Probably not faster enough. That's the hardest. You kind of just have to send it too. You can't really like test it out.
We should make this like a real sport though, you know, like rock climbing with your feet.
This is a real sport, baby.
Really? Rock climbing with your feet?
The,
Never heard
the
of
game. It's an e-sport. Okay.
that. Oh, the game is a sport, okay.
Ever heard of esports? I'm an athlete right now. What? Okay, maybe I want to like be kind of careful putting my foot on this banana.
Do they have like esports at the Olympics?
They were talking about adding them at one point. Okay, I improved my time by like 3 seconds. 1:18:24. Did my controller just disconnect again? Did my camera also disconnect? Cause
Yeah, it did.
okay. Interesting. Interesting. Very interesting. feel like USB driver problem is the only thing that would explain. No, that's not true. That's not the only thing that would explain that. Who knows what's going on in Windows, dude? Oh, this is not... What? Okay, gotta replug again, I guess. Okay.
You can do it. Let's go.
Not a great start. I guess you do have to go this way. Okay, we're gonna try to slide like this. No, slide. Left foot slide.
Wow. Gaming.
Ah! Whoops. How did that work? Nope. Okay. This is the run. Why? Unfortunate. Might be Jover. I think it is Jover off of that. I think it's, yeah. It might have actually been over regardless. I think I kind of needed to get this climb first try. Damn, the rest was kind of good. Very curious about the 30-second strats. There's probably some stupid cheese like.
You want to pull it up, or you want to just keep trying by yourself?
Oh no. I'm gonna
Okay.
do it my way.
Okay.
But I'll watch it after, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, I feel like the 118 is like. Yeah, okay. I feel like the 118 is like kind of good for normal strats. Yo, I still improved my time. Barely.
That's incredible.
I don't know, maybe 30 seconds is just like really good normal full speed going. Oh no. I want to reset. What I'm actually going to do is skip over to here. Wait, can I just... Imagine you can just walk over to this part.
The timer is seemingly still going.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's going to count. I also don't think I'm going to make it anyway. I don't think I'm going to make the time anyway. Especially if I get stuck here for an hour. Can't see shit. Need more. I need to like go farther left and then farther back right. Than I think I do. Yeah, I'm already over the time. Got that first try though. Okay, so if this works, that's really stupid. Yeah, it doesn't work. Okay, so you actually do have to do the full loop, which is good.
Oh shit.
I tried. That really does not save much time to do what I'm going for there. Is that guy destroying stuff again? Or are those other sounds?
I don't know.
Sounds like he might be smashing again. Hulk smashing.
I'm scared of that guy. Seriously.
We did it. Collect all achievements in baby steps. Ready for a different game. Wait, I wanted to do the invisible gym too, though. I'm not ready for a different game yet. Okay, that's a cool trophy, I guess.
Good job.
Oh, yo, I got the trophy upright. This is me.
That's
This
you.
is actually the exact opposite of me in this game because he's only using his hands and not his feet.
The greatest.
I kind of crushed it. Okay, so the only thing left that I potentially want to do is this. I'll try it a little bit, maybe. We were making some progress. Oh, jeez. And I have to deal with the sunglasses as well. I forgot about this shit. This is excruciating. He hit his head really hard there. How did the sunglasses stay on? What? Guess I have to kind of do that, and then that. Tricky.
Hey babe, you want a handmade vintage potty?
Potty, like toilet?
Yeah, like a toilet.
A handmade vintage toilet.
Mm-hmm. It's made out of wood.
This seems like it might actually be... I changed my mind from when I started this sentence. I don't know though. It's... I think I'm gonna keep trying it that way. Because if you slide down and then climb back up, it's like so slow. It takes so long. Could this movie be any louder? Or whatever it is. Show.
I'm just happy he's not.
He's
doing
not
whatever
yelling.
makes him angry.
Okay, this is farther than I've been before, I think. I think I want to go this way. I don't don't think there's going to be a path over there, so I think it's here or nowhere. Okay, that's just so much easier than I expected. And now it's going to be another set of sketchy ass these things. And there's no alternate path here, it's just this. Oh my god.
At least you still have the glasses.
Oh. Oh!
Nope. I jinxed it, sorry.
There's no way they get stuck there, though. It actually doesn't matter if they get stuck there. Nice bonk.
Oh, again.
This is doable, though. It's just figuring out the routes on these parts where it's like, you know, the slopes where you can just barely get up in some spots and just barely not get up in other spots. Like, it just makes it really painful to like trial and error the routes. But now that I know the route up to that spot where I got to, it's not that bad. It's still not easy, but it's not. It's not completely miserable. Oh, man. I wish I could just get myself to stop here instead of going down this next level. Maybe I should be listening to more podcasts.
No.
Why?
On the internet when everyone's on serotonin uptake.
Well, I don't have shit to say about
Do you
this.
foresee the
It's so boring.
situation when you're acting as a benevolent dictator for some time and you have like an apprentice that is sort of like near you and like learns how to do it and at some point takes over?
Yeah, I mean, we already have people who work on the compiler as well. So Raphael, who people in the beta know, has done a really decent amount of internal stuff on the compiler, and he understands it better than anyone but me. And so you could expand. We have one or two other people who've like touched the compiler a little, but like not done serious contributions in a while. So you can imagine doing that. How well does that work? I don't know. My personal experience is that I've been pretty disappointed on the game side when I try to bring people on who are
the twist there is not a good
not
strat.
experienced in it and try to coach
Okay,
them
the
on
glasses
how to do a
went
good job.
down and I stayed here.
It's weird, like, people don't seem to listen ever. They're just going to do what they're going to do, and you can give them all the advice in the world, and they won't follow it, and then you just have to rewrite their code 2 years later anyway, and you just paid money to employ them, and it didn't help. That's, you know, I'm categorizing a certain category of person. We've hired lots of programmers that did good jobs, so I'm not saying anything about that, but I'm just saying this idea that you bring somebody on to learn the system and then they're going to be able to take over, it requires a certain kind of person in the first place, and maybe that person's kind of hard to find, right? So there's some degree of luck involved as well. So I don't know, man. Like I said, it's something we got to figure out, and obviously after the game ships, this becomes a much more
Maybe
presently relevant issue. Right
the
now,
right
it's like
foot
something in the
angle is
future,
bad
but next
there.
year, after
Suddenly
the game
I
ships,
started
it's
doing
like,
this
okay,
wrong.
this is the next thing that we're doing is, releasing this in public. I will say there's one or two more features that I kind of want to make better.
Is this where he's finally going to
before
talk
we do
about the
that.
other
Like,
games?
Relatively decent. I mean, I think most of the major features in the language are fine.
What?
The macro system still isn't as good as I would have wanted it to be, and it's kind of complicated and causes a lot of implementation problems in the compiler. Like, so we have this hygiene. There's still some code in the compiler that's wrong, because in the early days, if you have a variable declaration, then whether it belongs to a particular function or data structure or whatever was just what is the scope the variable was declared in. And even if you have like an anonymous struct inside a struct, it belongs to the anonymous struct, and it just gets a little link importing the name into the parent struct or whatever. But then you have hygienic macros, and that's not true anymore. And when I first implemented those, I was like, oh, it's going to be pretty simple. But there both was all this older code that's like, oh, we understand where a variable is defined, where a variable is stored by what scope it's in.
How?
And then even to this
Everything's
day,
going wrong now, man.
like source code, by the way things are written in the source code, it can make clear what's important to understand and what's not important to understand.
What
the names
the
of variables, where the variables
fuck?
are stored, and all that. To this day, we have a variable called enclosing scope on the declaration that points at the place where it is registered, but like there is no separate equivalent variable for like where I am stored that's in any clear
you
way.
could-
And so
Oh, thanks.
That one was looking a
that
little...
could be a refactoring of
Crusty.
the compiler just to
Yeah.
make that fact clear and understood. But because it's sort of swept under the rug that way, I also mentally
Oh
sweep
my
it under the rug,
God.
because I go back, I'll spend some time working on the game.
Oh.
Compiler's not as fresh as in my mind anymore. I go back to work on the compiler, and I'll just like, oh yeah, we need to do this and that. Okay, what's the enclosing scope, and do it. And then I just sort of don't take the issue as seriously. And then some bug report comes up a month later, and it's like, oh yeah, got it. But the macro system is not as powerful as I would like. Like, we use it in basic ways in our game and all this stuff, and it's very useful, I would say, in certain specific use cases. Like if you want to inject some code and maybe some variables, like I've got a profiler and I want to have a little thing that looks like a function call that will put some code into the local scope or whatever. Aside from that use case, I don't use a ton of macros though, because like in C land, the historic use of macros a lot of the time was just like, I want to make sure this thing gets inlined, right? And in modern compilers, it's not really an issue because they inline way more stuff than you necessarily would want anyway. But also we have guaranteed inline, and so you just say inline. You don't need to do that. The other thing that
Okay,
you
I
would
need
use
to
in
not
macros for
use that
in C
spot.
is stuff that
Oh, the
syntactically is not
glasses are
valid
going
in the base language,
down.
right? Because you're just pasting together strings and whatever.
Or
And
are they? Where are the
I
glasses?
made the explicit decision not to do that because there's a couple things about that. One is that it's just a place where certain kinds of messes happen in C. It makes code hard to understand when people do a lot of that. It makes it very hard to debug because macros are not in
I
a
see.
real target language, and so your debugger doesn't know what to do with them. And it's the worst thing in C when like you need to step into some code and you're like, oh, this thing is calling a bunch of huge macros. You just have to like guess at that point.
Okay, I need to step a little higher on that step across to the right.
So that's terrible. And then also, it introduces, like the type def in C, it introduces an order of compilation dependency, right? So in C, there's this thing, it's the classic thing about C grammar, where the grammar has to like change a little bit, like the way it's parsing things has to change a little bit based on whether something's a type or not, right? So in this language, we don't have that. You can tell if something's a type or not from where it's written, and so that type might not get defined until like 3 files later when you're compiling, and you don't need a type declaration telling you it's a type before you can parse it like you do in C, right? Macros are like that too. Like if you have a macro, it has to be declared before the thing that uses it. Otherwise, you can't make sense out of what it is. Or C macros, right?
Come on,
Device
man.
across. And so I wanted to avoid that kind of a thing.
Okay,
just as a
let's
basic,
go all the way to the top before we go
how
to the
does
left.
this language work and what happens and all that. If you want to reintroduce that, of course, your meta program can run a preprocessor, right? And that's fine. But like
I'm
in
losing
the
it. I'm
base
losing my
vanilla
mind.
language that we give to everybody, how does it work? And I wanted to avoid that kind of thing. And so as a result, our macro system operates on parsed data that is not yet type checked. But so it operates on
That day
which part of the thesis
they
was
went
that it was
down.
really powerful because you could do like Lisp and like mess around with things and whatever. But part of the reason people did that in Lisp is because all the data structures were that way anyway. They were just like all trees and stuff, and so whatever. You don't really want to store stuff in trees if you can help it. I mean, that's more like the data side, right? But then when you look at code, you don't want the
Nice.
data structure for your
Sure.
code to be all these
We
like,
take those.
binary trees. You want it to be more defined structs like you define in C or C++, where there's a lot of members in the struct because they're stored contiguously, but also it's just easier to understand. Like, look, here's all the stuff about this declaration. Like, here's the type, and here's the expression it's bound to, and here's any modifiers that are syntactically, like, all that information is in one place, as opposed to, like, I have to follow a bunch of links to get that information.
Maybe if I step up here,
And so
it'll
all
be
the
easier.
information that we send to the meta program, but also
Nope,
that the macro
nope, I
deals
regret
with, is
everything.
that kind of a thing. And it's also strongly typed as opposed to like Lisp, right? And so all these differences mean maybe you just don't do that kind of a thing, that kind of rewrite in the same way. And so that's what the one feature from the language that hasn't totally landed. Like, my picture would have been that by now you would have macros that take code as arguments, and they very easily do a bunch of rewrites on the code and whatever. And the reality is we do have macros that take code as arguments and do rewrites, but it tends to be a kind of involved thing with a bunch of code that runs at compile time. And the good thing about that, though, is it's a lot more understandable than Lisp macros because it's just regular code that you can read, and it makes sense, and it's got variable names that
Jesus.
are longer than one letter, and like whatever. But it also it's just not as carefree and simple to deploy as I would like. And so that's the big question for me with the macros is like, is there something to do there? And releasing before we answer that question is questionable, right? Because then again, if we change the way macros work, everybody has to whatever. So we'll see. But that for me is the one major unresolved semantic question. I mean, also though, there is a lot to be said for like, look, this is
Whoops.
just version 1 of the language, and we could fork a version 2 and just make breaking changes from there, and it's not that big of a deal. I don't know. Yeah, we can start naming it after the year, like let's see.
Exactly. Like every 3 years you have another release.
Yeah.
I have a couple of closing questions about the game.
Sure.
Please.
Did you disclose the platforms, the order of Sinking Star?
So what we said in the trailer is, please wishlist the game on Steam. It is called Order of the Sinking Star. Wishlists don't cost you anything. They're free, but they let Gabe... So Gabe is on his yacht in New Zealand,
Exactly.
and he has a little screen that a little line comes up every time somebody wishlists a game. And so if Gabe sees that happen a lot for a game, he'll be like... He'll call Jay and say, Jay, please give this game good placement on the store. Right? And so that is why. So when you wishlist it, it makes sure that on launch day people actually get the game as a suggestion. So we said that at the end of the trailer as well, because the trailer premiered in the Game Awards, which is a very big audience. They released the statistic yesterday or something that there were 171 million live streams,
I kind of stopped
which
watching.
doesn't count all the YouTube views and all this,
Not
right?
watching.
Now,
Walking.
because the nature of statistics,
I kind of
is
tried to
you don't really
abandon
hide,
it,
there's
and
probably
that's
not
just a
people
bad
who watched the
idea
whole
after
show.
that point.
That
You
maybe
kind of have to
counts people
commit.
who watched 1 minute of the show, but we're in there. It's a 4-hour show, and we're 90 seconds of the 4-hour show, right? So, whatever. But it's a large audience, and so we want to make sure people know about that. We do want to come to other platforms as well. Like traditionally, our games have launched on consoles as well. We're still figuring that out. We don't have anything super specific to announce, but it is likely that we will come to consoles in some way.
Dude.
And when we have very
Dude.
concrete
Wait,
things
where-
to announce there, we
where are
will
the glasses?
announce them.
Wait,
yeah,
did I
so
not pick 'em up
certainly,
last
you
time?
know, in terms of the programming language and the game
That would
as
have been
well,
funny.
there's nothing that like restricts it to Windows. You know, there's a little bit. Actually, one of the ergonomic things that we're trying to do in the language. One of the. I won't say what it is, but there's a feature that C++ has that C didn't have. Maybe it has it now. I don't know. And the C++ version kind of sucks. So we didn't have this feature at all, and it makes it just a little bit more difficult to deploy on weird operating systems like Android or whatever than you otherwise would. And we want to make that totally ergonomic and streamlined. But
How
yeah,
was I-
mean,
how did
you
I
know,
do
we
this
are
the
able
first
to
time,
compile
man?
Executables for different consoles and all this stuff.
Maybe I should just
people in
drop
the beta
down.
do as well. And so it's just really where and when does it make sense for us to launch the game is the question.
Okay. Now, you mentioned a couple of times that the engine is there to stay, and it seems like it's very like Sokoban-oriented engine. Does
Yeah.
that mean that like the next games or possible games will be around the same area, or is it just like the Jai core engine will there to stay, but it will need to undergo some changes to fit the new game?
Yeah, so here's what I would say is this question also comes into play, I mean, for anyone who wants to think about, because we're going to open source this engine. You'll be able to compile it and run it, and it's like a guy walking around in a Sokoban room, and you're like, but I want to make a first-person game where you walk around and take photos or something. I want to make a totally different game. And it's like, well, the engine we're going to release it's not trying to completely be Unity or Unreal, so it won't just magically do other genres of game. It would require a programmer to do that, right? However, a lot of the really hard parts of an engine are agnostic to the genre of the game. So like all the stuff that interfaces with the GPU, defines the data structures of like what is a mesh, right? How do you send a mesh to the GPU? How do you change the parameters of what's getting sent to the shader, right?
Get down
Even
there,
like the
man.
editor,
Just get.
a lot of what's in that editor, some of it is at this point tailored toward like, well, a lot of gameplay objects are one thing in a square, but you know, you saw me zoom the camera around a little, and like that's not that different
This
from
is
what you would do
brutal.
in a first-person game. And so
I don't know. I might
a lot of it is
give
like
up on this,
redeployable for
mess
other
with it
genres, but because we're not in the engine
offline
business, we're
if
not
I feel
gonna
like
sell an
it,
engine.
or move
We're not
on
going to
and
be
uninstall the
doing that.
game
So
if I
we're
feel
not
like
competing,
it's.
with Tim Sweeney or anybody like that.
Like, we don't even know how cool
It's
this
just
thing is at the
goal-
top
okay,
of this.
here's what I would say philosophically.
We also don't
right,
know how
is
much more
there are
cancer is
people
on
who
the
are
way
trying
up
to
there.
Compete with Tim Sweeney. There's Unity game engine. There's the Godot game engine, or I've seen people pronounce that in various ways. So those are all of them have some certain kind of philosophy behind them, which is they're essentially GUI based creation engines, and then you could kind of program a little bit to make your game, but like the programmer is not central in those, I would say, right? Like if you're going to write some GD script or whatever, like it's not that hard to do. People who are not professional programmers could do it, and you could ship a game, right?
I messed up.
And if you're
okay,
going
it's
to go
fine.
edit the
It's fine.
engine code, you like could, but like not a lot of people actually do that. They make more like ancillary systems on the side. So this is going to be more like a programmer-centric thing. Where
I
it's
think
like,
that's
we
what I
wanna
should be
make a
doing,
game,
doing it fast.
we want to have a starting point that's like professional quality, but we're willing to do a lot of the changes, moving things around, deleting things, whatever. It's going to be more like that, and so it has a different
Damn. Okay. I
philosophical
thought I didn't make
approach
it.
than these off-the-shelf engines, and that also
I need to
means
take that slower, I
it
think.
won't be appropriate for nearly as many people, right? So like the user base of this thing that we're going to release is probably not going to be as high as the user base of any of these other things that we mentioned, but for the people who want the kind of thing that we release, it's going to be pretty cool. Now in terms of our own use, because that was where you started the question,
Shouldn't have tried. Should have abandoned
it
it.
so happened. So the next games after this are not Sokoban games. They're not even puzzle games, mostly. But they do have a little bit in common in terms of the kinds of characters and scenes and whatever. So you could imagine, like a Diablo style game has this sort of overhead camera view and you run around and fight monsters in an action way, right? So you can imagine it's that kind of thing where there's some crossover with what we're doing right now.
Can't find the
So like
sunglasses.
the view in this game that we saw is very different from like the view in The Witness, which is like first person looking around, right? And so there's some overlap, I will say, and a lot of the art techniques that we spent all this time figuring out will also make sense in the new games if we stick to the roadmap, which I don't. We haven't really started on any of these next things, so anything can change.
Did I hear correctly? Not a puzzle game?
Not a puzzle game. So we actually have. There's 3 different games that are either in some prototype state or, 2 of them are in a prototype state. One of them is has never been implemented at all, but is sort of a natural follow-up from this game or some other stuff. And the 2 that are actually in prototype state are not puzzle
Oh, I
games.
should have taken the right step,
The
right foot
third
first,
one,
maybe. No idea where the glasses are.
would have puzzle
Oh.
elements, but would be very different from anything that we're doing now.
Sorry, what did you just say?
So, 2 of them are in a prototype state. One of them is has never been implemented at all, but is sort of a natural follow-up from this game or some other stuff. And the 2 that are actually in prototype state are not puzzle games. The third one would have puzzle elements, but would be very different from anything that we're doing now.
Okay.
So who knows? Who can predict the future?
Super vague, super secret.
Yes. Yes. That's the way we like it.
All right then. I feel like we're reaching the end. I think we
Okay.
should mention that the Order of the Sinking Star
That's the way.
is available on
That's
Steam
it.
for wish lists. And if there's
Yes.
not, if
I
there's
should
not
try
a
this
spike
time.
after this podcast, I will have angry Jonathan Blow
No.
discussing this afterwards.
changed my
like,
mind.
How
No, we
how's
won't
this
have that,
possible?
but like, look, you want Gabe to
Or-
notice you. You want Senpai notice me for Gabe N, and
I don't
that
know.
will
I don't know which way's
happen
better
if you
here.
click the button. That's all. He sees every wish list. It's like Santa Claus.
He might
he
even
knows.
send you email personally if you wish list. He might. So
Well, actually, I mean, that was the whole thing. Was you could email Gabe, and he would just read it and reply. I don't know if that's still true, because maybe once he said that, he got bombarded. But maybe, like, there's definitely lore on the internet where people screenshot that
but
Gabe
on the
replied to me.
Valve website, you can look at the contact, and then you like scroll through the list of employees, and it's like everybody's email address, like Valve email address. So you can you can still do it. I don't know. I don't know.
Anyway, so if you wishlist the game on there, there's other ways that you could find out about it.
Thought it'd be
There's,
worth a try on the
Twitter,
left one that
Sinking
time.
Star game. Search for it.
Pretty sure I have it
You
wish listed.
follow that. There's a Discord channel if you like to waste time on social media. I tried to retweet the Discord channel the other day, and like Twitter rewrote the link, and then it wasn't opening Discord correctly anymore, and that didn't work. So I'll try to retweet it, and if we can get computers to function correctly.
Not really sure what I should be doing
you can also
differently
find
here.
me personally on Twitter as well. Unfortunately,
I mean, I think I shouldn't go for
I
the
still
left
spend
one.
a
I think I
little too
should
much time on my website reading trash.
What
I
do you
should
do? What do you do to
go for the
seclude
right one.
yourself from,
That's
like,
a little higher.
notifications and social media?
Well, I mostly don't. So, so Twitter is at least, like, I never would have notifications turned on for something like that. So I only see that stuff when I explicitly go to it, right? And so that's my general. So we have a Slack for the company, right? I'm not on there because I don't want messages popping up all the time. So I mostly respond via email, and email again is like you go to the email and you see the email. If you're not going to the email, you're not bothered by it, and that's everything. So, messaging apps on my phone, I mean, I have like 4 because you have to, but none of them have notifications on. and you
That's
just
pretty based.
You just only open them.
Not even
when you feel like it.
notifications
And
for
so
messages. It's pretty
then you're at
based.
least not having your focus derailed all the time. You still have to deal with this other thing of like, I'm kind of mentally fidgeting because I don't want to focus right now, so I'm gonna
No.
go distract myself. And I do that a little too much probably, but I still get work done, so it's okay, kind of.
Okay, there's been like for the past 4 hours of the stream, like hundreds of questions. What's the email
Okay.
address for Jai Beta? And I didn't.
I don't like. Okay,
So if
I
you wanna disclose
personally
it-
put people in the beta still. I would love to have a helper for this, but I don't want to put it in an open form. I mean, you can find it. We still haven't changed
That's a
it.
puzzle.
Too many people email
That's
it.
a
You can
puzzle.
find it, but like, so Soding, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he did some streams where he was using it, right? And like, just those streams were, very popular, and just there were tons of emails that came in, and it's great to have that kind of attention, but it's also like, we're getting
Dude.
I have real work to do when I'm getting emailed by all these people wanting to get in the compiler beta. And
Okay.
so the reality is, like, it's obviously good to have people in the beta, but like, because we only have a limited number of people in the beta, it helps us focus and just not be dragged down by this, like, dealing with community all the time and stuff. And so
Bro.
we're just trying to walk a really thin line there. So it's not a judgment of anybody's, like, again, it's not an insult or a
This just
judgment
gets
of
worse
someone's
and
personal
worse.
value if we don't answer
Just
your
gets worse
email.
and
It's
worse.
just like sometimes we get too many emails, and we just that's really a thing, is like sometimes when we're not getting that many emails, it's like, oh yeah, we could add these people, no problem. And sometimes it's like, you just have to make a really good case if you email during those times. But also, I try to, there's some amount of overhead per person that you deal with, and while taking on that overhead, you want to maximize how well do you test the language, how well do you make sure it works in different contexts on different systems for different people. And so we try to add people who are really actively going to use it for real problems and real problems that we maybe don't have as much coverage for, right, through other beta users. Is there's some algorithm there or some heuristic? People use the word algorithm all the time when they mean heuristic, and I just did that because I've been corrupted by the casual language of the people. There is some heuristic there. Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of emails that say, hey, I have 2
Holy
weeks to
autism.
mess around with this
No.
between homework assignments, and I'm just like, that's not who we're looking for in the beta right now, just because it's not efficient in terms of amount of test of the language versus overhead, right? So but if you really want to figure out where to email, you can find it. It's out there.
That's gonna be the lead. One last question, super last question. You played Blueprints. What are your thoughts on Blueprints?
Random
I
ass.
don't want to.
No.
So the problem is, if I comment about, there's multiple frames of mind I could be in when answering questions like this. If I'm a designer, every single game I play, there's things I liked about it and things I don't like about it, right? And I could comment on those. And the problem is, anytime I do that, somebody makes clips of me saying the negative part and not the positive part, and massively overemphasizing the negative part, and posting that on YouTube for rage clicks, and then everybody thinks I'm an asshole.
Oh, wow.
Including people like frickin' Fabian Yeason, who people in this community know. Like, he got mad at me one day on Twitter. This was years ago, but he was like, "You're such a negative person," and I'm like, "No, you're just seeing the selective, like, things that people are amplifying," and like, it just, like, when it starts to affect your real world relationships, it's really poisonous at that point. Sorry, I shouldn't have brought him into this, but like, that's what it came into my mind. Apologies. Okay, he's a cool guy, I'm sure.
Episode with Fabian
we had this argument.
releases next Saturday, like tomorrow. in
What
2 days.
releases?
In 2 days. So I had discussion with him, and it actually
Oh, okay.
releases with on Saturday. Discussion with
Now,
Fabio.
he's a smart, very technically knowledgeable guy, so I'm sure that's good. How many hours was that one?
3 hours plus.
Okay. Okay, standard length. Okay, the point being, also just because I'm known in indie games, like indie game developers especially, like freak out about any comment that I make. Again, partially using it for rage bait, but partially just like we need, in this era of the internet where it's so easy to see what people say, you just have to understand that people are people and they have opinions, and it's not the end of the world if their opinion is not the same as your opinion. So I'm not going to say any opinions about any games is the upshot. But I do think so. Blueprints is nice in many ways. One of them is
How long after
really
this was
shows
the
that
stream
even
when he
2025
played
when
Leap Year and
things
rage
are-
quit it after 1 minute?
really
It said it was dog
like
shit.
so many games get released on Steam. A lot of them, like, not that much effort went into, obviously, right? That's true
What's
on
up, Simon?
consoles as well. It used to be harder to get on consoles. Now there's, like, you know, shovelware on consoles sometimes. I think maybe they started to cut down on it, but it's been a problem. And so how do you stand out? And so Blueprints is a 2025 example. Animal Well, I think, came out last year or something, but it's another example of people who had a vision for something they wanted to make. That vision involves careful craftsmanship over the experience, good presentation, but also having something interesting to present through the good presentation, and just like working hard on the aspects of the programming. How does it feel to be in the thing and all that? And they put a bunch of work in, and then people responded. They were like, "Oh, this is a really good thing," and
How
it's
much-
very
do it-
heartening to know that you can still do that, because some places that's not necessarily true. Like,
Do I care
have I
about
heard
this?
about
Should I
games
care
on
about this
iOS that
much?
work that way? No, I don't think that I have. Does that mean there aren't any? Well, I don't know, but I kind of think there aren't any, right? Because that market is set up in a different way, such
Where's-
that like you buy users and you get on the top list and whatever. But for whatever reason, it's still possible on PC and console to like have a thing that's simultaneously your passion project, but like sometimes people say passion project in a dismissive way, like, oh, it's not what you do for a living and get paid for, it's like your but no, but just like something that you really care about and that you worked hard on, and that's different from everything else. And the fact that that still works is great. And Blueprints is an especially interesting one. So Animal Well is kind of a Metroid game, and that's a genre that like
I
people
regret
understand,
choosing
right?
this route, but I'm
Blueprints
too
isn't
committed at this
even
point to this
in a
route.
genre.
Maybe I'm
I mean,
not.
it's
Maybe I
sort
should
of
try the
like-
other route.
Kind of like a game that
'Cause
you
I'm
might
getting to that
play
point
with
fairly
friends around a
consistently, right?
table a little bit, with like placing cards and stuff, but not even it doesn't fit into anything exactly, right? And so if you ask people a year ago, what's the game that you're going to want to play most in, let's imagine what you wanted to play in 2025 and tell me what you would just be really happy to play, and literally zero of those people would have described Blueprints, because it doesn't fit into any preconceived pattern, and yet it was made, it comes out. Actually, that's not quite true, because there was a Blueprints demo last year, I think, if I remember correctly. But ignoring that fact, right? That's still part of the magic of probably all creative fields, but especially games. Is
It's
like
right under the thing.
you can give people something that they didn't know that they wanted, and be very successful that way, and they will appreciate that, because it's like, oh yeah, I didn't predict that this thing would be what I wanted to play, but I really want to play this thing, and that's great. And that's also how we expand the just the overall manifold of what video games do, right? So I don't think there's a subgenre of games yet that's called the Blueprints, like, right? Because
Yeah.
it's too early,
Yeah.
but you could imagine that happening now, right? Because it's anytime there's a very successful game, people are like, I'm gonna do that game, but there's monsters in the hallway that follow you, or whatever, right? And so we'll see we'll see over the next few years if that becomes a genre. But I wouldn't be that surprised if it does. Yeah.
All right.
Is that a good enough answer? Did I dodge the question while not dodging the
I
question?
feel like yes, you made like you very very like around it, but also like positive, not to make.
I mean,
sure
to
that
not
it's-
dodge. I think it's
Not-
it's a good game, obviously, and it does a really interesting. It does one of the things that people really like, which is when there's a lot of hidden things about a game that you can discover and figure out. I do think that there are some things that are a little rough about the design, but for a first-time designer, that's not surprising at all. And it's amazing as a first-time designer to come out with a game this sophisticated, actually. So, yeah, but I do. If I designed Blueprints, I would have made some different decisions in some places, but we're not going to give the Rage Farm.
gonna throw up,
any
man.
fuel.
All right, perfect. Jonathan Blow,
Yeah.
Order of the Sinking Star, available on Steam for wishlists. For everybody live in the audience, thank you for joining and showing up,
Thank you, everybody.
submitting questions. Jonathan, please stay so that the recording's gonna get uploaded.
Yep.
I feel like I have to try that other route once, but like. I'm also feeling super burnt. Super burnt. Maybe that's how I should be doing that. That's not how I should be doing anything. The stupid invisible thing again, man. I mean, okay. The game told me that it's time to play a different game. Explicitly told me. I mean, it's been telling me that from minute one, though. Implicitly. But this time it explicitly told me. It's time to play a different game, and here I am. I mean, there's still so much climb left after this. I feel like I need this to be more consistent. But like how? I mean, this first part actually has it. Up to this, it's gotten pretty consistent. Wait. Come on, man. Come on. Maybe I should take that as the sign to end the stream, because I probably should talk to this person. Okay, this is the last attempt, I guess. GG's, baby steps. Probably won't stream it again. Game told me to stop. Fun game though. Fun game. Mostly. It was really fun sometimes, and it was really not fun a lot of the time. But you know, overall, I have to say I liked it. I can't believe the pedometer and the speedrun were the rarest. I mean, I guess those are the hardest. They're just the rarest by far, though. Anyway, thanks for watching the Baby Steps saga. Not sure when I'll stream again, but thanks for watching, all 2 of you. Goodbye.